Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching.
Girls, the chimes are about to strike. Let's hurry up and get to the table. May uttered this cry loud enough to attract the attention of her friends, but no one heard her. She looked toward the ajar balcony door, where the festive goal of the capital was coming from. Gwen and Lily were watching this mesmerizing picture from the ninth floor. May repeated her appeal louder, and the girls shouted in one voice, "Come." The owner of a luxurious apartment in an elite residential complex was used to having all her wishes fulfilled instantly, but her friends were showing clear disobedience, so she, displeased, shrugged her shoulders as if trying to throw off something unpleasant and disgusting. Acting like teenage girls, and yet trying to portray themselves as well. The best part of our society. May was accustomed from her childhood to classify herself as an elite. Much of the formation of this worldview contributed to the education, because the girl's father was quite rich. The hostess impatiently tapped the glass with her finger, and the friends noisily poured into the spacious room, where everything sparkled and sparkled. The space of the richly furnished living room was filled with the expectation of a miracle. But most of all, the celebration was in the eyes of the young women. May, at least on New Year's Eve, don't be such a nerd. We have to sing until we drop to have fun tonight. Lily laughed and added, "Gwen, you've put it wrong. We're going to drink and have fun." May smiled indulgently. "I won't let you drink till you drop, because a real lady shouldn't lose her human form." Lily hugged her friend by the shoulders and began to shake her. "Speak, and you will allow us to have fun. We want to have a good time today. In some centuries gathered together, and you put restrictions on us. It's unfair and even cruel. We have to go to the Christmas tree on this magical night, where people go out." May closed the balcony door. She looked at the joyful faces of her friends. A different emotion raged in her new heart. She smiled again. "Why do we have to go to the Christmas tree when we can sit here and talk? I can't stand these crowds full of drunken, screaming women." Gwen ignored her hostess's remarks. She looked at the huge panel, which was a stylized version of a chronometer. "While you're arguing here, time is running out." A certain me, as if on cue, simultaneously looked at the clock. Unknown author of the design miracle decided to make the dial of the sun, which is a huge ball spread over a green valley with a river, toy houses. This picture of summer idyll attracted the eye, and now the three women were in the power of the illusion created by the artist. It became so quiet that the movement of the hands was clearly audible. 1. Gwen came to her senses. "Only a minute left. Open the champagne. May, have you prepared pencils and napkins?" "Why?" The hostess gave the table a check-up look. Lily had already grabbed the empty bottle of fizzy drink. "What a stupid question. We'll make a wish. Did you forget?" "That's right, girls. It's gonna be a good one." May rushed to the elegant mahogany hero, and in a second on the table appeared 3 napkin pens in front of you. "You can make your wishes." The first strikes of the chimes burst into the room. Gwen and Lily squealed and began scribbling hastily on the naughty napkins. May watched her friends with an indulgent smile. Lily was the first to complete the task. She lightly uncorked the bottle and filled the glasses. On the 12th stroke, the 3 women sipped their glasses. "You have to dry to the bottom or the wish won't come true." Gwen displayed the empty flute. May gave her friend a cold stare. "It's all nonsense, child's play. One idiot invented this ritual, and others repeat it, stupid and dumb." Lily gently pushed the empty glass away from her. "May, today is such a wonderful holiday. I want to be happy and cheerful. You can't go around with a sour face and lecture everyone. You don't like the custom, no one's forcing you to do it. But Gwen and I love it. You're the one who's always saying you should respect other people's opinions. Or did you just mean your own opinion?" May realized that she had said too much and tried to correct her mistake. "That you're paying attention to my grumbling. You know I can be a bore sometimes. Why don't you tell me the secret of what you've been up to?" Gwen made scary eyes. "You can't tell secrets, or the wish won't come true." Lily filled the glasses again. "I'll tell you. We all understand perfectly well that it's just a beautiful element of the game. But it's still nice to live with hope. For years now, I've written just 2 words on a napkin. I want to get married. But up there, where they register our wish, I'm always put at the back of the line. A year goes by, and my application remains unprocessed. The girl looked at the chandelier and wagged her finger as if the crystal lamp was to blame for her unsettled love life. May looked at her friend with interest. That's an interesting interpretation. By the way, it explains why I refuse to indulge in such amusements. Gwen was actively wielding her fork, but it didn't prevent her from inserting her meaningful word at the right moment. Tasty salad you got yourself cooked, or? May interrupted her friend. I made everything on this table myself. I really wanted to get your approval. Gwen hummed. Good for you. And speaking of boys, May, why did you suddenly decide to revive our girlish traditions? If my memory serves me correctly, you have at your personal disposal not only this luxurious apartment, but also a famous husband, even more famous, and a whole box of other privileges. Did you leave them alone for the sake of meeting old friends on such a holiday? This question took the woman by surprise. She began to twirl the champagne-filled glass in her hands. It was spontaneous. You know, sometimes everything in life changes in an instant. Yeah, like New Year's Eve was one thing, and then the chimes did their thing. Bang, bang, and everything changed. May nodded her head. That's about right, Gwen. The boundary between present and past lives seems invisible, but it's impossible to cross that line. Lily looked at her friend sympathetically. Why this verbal equilibrium? Tell me honestly, your hockey player cheated on you. Found another? May struggled to find the words. No, there's another reason. You know, guys, it's complicated. Joe's retired from big sports, he's sick, and I'm not ready for this kind of challenge. I tried, but it just doesn't work. May tried to sound convincing, but there was indifference in her voice. The fork slipped out of Gwen's hands and fell noisily onto the plate. What do you mean it's not ready? May had already recovered from her momentary confusion. It's very simple. When I got married, I didn't think that I would have to take my husband to the bathroom, wash him, and make his bed. I'm sorry for the details, but you asked for it. Did you think your whole life was going to be made up of pleasantries? May smirked. You'd think otherwise. It is the duty of any decent man to provide for his woman. For the sake of fairness, I should point out, Joe had been up to the task for over 7 years. But now, in addition to his health problems, he was having financial difficulties. And you were scared? Yes, I was scared. What's wrong with that? I'm a normal woman, not a nurse. I need a healthy man. Lily resolutely got up from the table. Another ruined New Year's Eve. Come on, Gwen. Let's go under the tree and then we'll crash at my place. We're not used to truffles and lobster, but we'll have a decent appetizer too. Gwenya followed her friend. Thank you, May. But we really should go. We're not the right company for you. The friends hurried to leave May's apartment, who saw them off with an angry look. But you hypocrites are miserable. They pretend to be paragons of virtue, but they'd sell themselves for an extra 100. They could hear the elevator going up before they got in, Lily, May said disappointedly. You're used to measuring everyone by your own yardstick, but there are other values in life besides money. Goodbye. The automatic doors closed almost silently, and May remained standing on the landing. It was a holiday outside, and she was in mourning. The clock read 2:15. God, what a bad start to the year. And why did I invite those idiots over? I'll make it up to them. May frantically searched her phone for the right number. Harry, Happy New Year. Don't you miss me? Oh, that's good to hear. Okay, I'll be your snow maiden for the night. Wait for me. May had long noticed that Joe's ex-boyfriend had a thing for her. Once the men played together, but Harry was lucky enough to draw the lucky lot, so he was frankly jealous of his friend's success. The former friend was even ready to mess with Joe, but not everyone had a lucky draw. Now he hinted at this circumstance, to which May replied, Harry, I promise to give you a chance you've been waiting for a long time. I hope you know what I'm talking about. The man's satisfied chuckle was heard in the receiver and whispered, I'm really looking forward to you. The mood immediately lifted to the right level. May most appreciated those who openly admired her. She examined her reflection in the mirror, corrected the tightly fitting dress that was perfect for her figure. And why not? How long can one abide by the nun's code? I am a lively and very beautiful woman. I need to shake off the stress too. And Harry is a very nice man and deserves a woman's warmth. May slipped her mink coat over her shoulders and headed for the elevator. Henry couldn't get used to the deafening silence that had settled in his huge house for months. When the successful businessman had built the mansion, he dreamed that his wife would have at least 3 kids who would later give them grandchildren. But Callie cringed at the prospect of being the mom of many children. She had told her husband many times, "Henry, come down to earth. Look around you. We need to get Joe back on his feet." It was indeed a turbulent time back then. "Callie, these things are temporary. Trust me, it'll only take a few years for things to get back to normal. I know what I'm talking about, and I know I can provide for my family." But the woman wouldn't give up. "Henry, you don't have my best interests at heart. I've got a dissertation coming up, and I'm not going to stop there. So maternity leave is not in my plans." Kelly moved step by step towards her main goal. But on this path, the family for her was a secondary factor. So Joe was practically from birth in the care of nannies and governesses. When the boy grew up, the family moved into a new apartment almost in the heart of the capital. By that time, social groups had already been clearly formed in the country, and Henry was sincerely glad that he was on the top step of this ladder. But he did not boast of his high position. On the contrary, he liked to spend his time in good male company. His wife often hinted to him that a man of this status should choose his friends more responsibly. To these remarks he always replied, "I have never been a snob and I am not going to become one. One must always remain a human being." One thing surprises me, how quickly some of our society has changed. Anyone in particular? At least you, for all I know, you've never been an earl, and you act as if you had blue blood in your veins. Callie was angry at such reasoning, but she did not want to be like her husband and kept silent. Perhaps it was the lack of understanding that caused the couple to drift further apart every day. But if the parents did not want or did not want to admit it, Joe painfully perceived the split in the family. Many times the teenager tried to reason with his parents, but they did not hear him. Therefore, the departure of Callie abroad was the expected finale of many years of confrontation. It happened right on Christmas Eve. Callie was so much agitated that she embarrassed Henry. "Callie, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were on some kind of medication. What is it about you that makes you so excited, so energized?" The woman hugged and kissed her husband in front of her son, though she'd never allowed herself such liberties in front of a child before. "Henry, I'm really bursting with joy. I've waited all these years for this day, and now it's here. I wanted to keep it a secret, but now that you've brought it up, I'll confess it." The woman paused, and Henry felt his heart racing. Despite his excitement, he tried to turn it into a joke, because he could see how anxiously his son was watching them. "Don't tell me you decided to rob a bank or a jewelry store on New Year's Eve." The woman wrinkled her nose. "Well, as usual, you've ruined everything with your flat jokes," Joe intervened. "Mom, Dad didn't say anything offensive. You just take humor wrong." Callie Semyonovna tapped her knuckles on the tabletop, as if she were not close people but students. "I see that you're conspiring. Well, maybe it's for the best. You two will make a good couple while I'm away." Joe froze, and Henry asked sharply, "Where do you think you're going, Callie?" "Don't be silly, Henry. I've got a lucky ticket, and I don't want to miss my chance. As part of a partnership with the European education community, I'm going to Austria for an internship. Couldn't you have at least given us a heads up before?" "Henry, why? We've been living our own lives for a long time. You and Joe won't even notice I'm gone. Besides, our son's a man on his own and he doesn't need a nanny." Henry couldn't resist taking a jab at his wife. "It's funny to hear you say that, because you've never burdened yourself with unnecessary worries. For you, science has always been more important than family." Women philosophically noted, "Sometimes you have to sacrifice the most expensive. But what can you do? That's life. You should be happy for me, but you're sour. Well, it won't be long, because it's only a 2-year internship." Henry saw his wife off with his son. He remembers the day well. The New Year holidays had not yet had time to make noise, so the Christmas tree was in the center of the airport building. Passengers arriving from the holidays were eager to have their pictures taken with a synthetic Santa Claus in their arms. Kaylee kept looking at her watch, and it was obvious that she was burning with impatience. Sooner they would leave the country. That's why the goodbye turned out crumpled and cold. For a few seconds, the woman leaned on the shoulder of her visibly grown-up son. "Son, take care of your daddy and be sure to come in the summer. I'll get you a visa." Henry's memory was preserved by his wife's smile. Then the man thought, this is the smile of people who have gotten rid of something they don't need. At that moment, he realized that his wife was leaving his life forever, but he said nothing to his son about his hunches. Not even a year later, the man received a notice in the mail that his wife had filed for dissolution of marriage. He felt humiliated and insulted. Trying to control his emotions, Henry dialed his wife's number. Kelly Semyonovna called every week to check on her son's affairs. She was no longer interested in her husband's affairs. The businessman never called her first, so the woman on the other side of Europe was surprised. "Henry, is something wrong? Do you have the conscience to ask?" "Don't yell at me, just tell me what happened." "No, you explain to me what the message I got means." "I didn't think you'd get it so quickly." "Well, guess what? I did. You could have told me, at least called me." "Henry, you do realize that calls are very expensive." The man interrupted his wife with irritation. "Kelly, you're not very handy. You've got an excuse. Are you so strapped for cash that you can't call your husband? Have I offended you so much that you don't think it's worth discussing this matter over the phone? I didn't realize you'd fallen to that level, but that's your business. And you don't have to worry about the divorce. I have already instructed my lawyer, and he will prepare all the papers." There was silence on the other end, but Henry could sense, even from a distance, what thoughts were running through his wife's mind to prolong her agony. He remained silent and won this fight. A deep sigh was heard as Kelly took a deep breath. "Henry, you speak so calmly about this. Why don't you ask me why I decided to take this step?" "I'll tell you honestly, I don't care. We haven't had a family for a long time, so I'm absolutely not interested in your personal life." "Really? Did you think I'd cry and beg you? But we have a son. Remember, Joe's about to be 16 and he's entitled to decide his own destiny. But you can talk to him about moving in with me. I wouldn't dream of it. Let him decide who he wants to stay with." Joe chose his father, but all the years he lived with a heavy burden on his soul and could not understand why his mother was so cruel to him. After all, shortly after that landmark conversation with her husband, the woman called her son and said that she was marrying his Austrian colleague. But Joe didn't even listen to his mother and hung up. It wasn't until months later that Henry found out about that phone call. By unspoken agreement from then on, that son and father never mentioned his mother. Henry sat in front of the fireplace, and the peaceful crackling of the fire induced sleep. The long New Year's vacation was, on the one hand, a pleasant addition to the extreme conditions of life, but on the other hand, it was very discouraging. In the near future, a whole pile of accumulated problems in the company was to be solved. But most importantly, the man's concern was his son. He felt guilty for what had happened to him. After all, in movies and television, reports do not tell what professional athletes pay the price. Yes, there is a downside to everything. There is a price to pay for everything. Henry spoke aloud the thought that had been bothering him the most lately. He turned the wood in the fireplace and decided to check on his son. But no sooner had the man taken a few steps than he heard a noise. The drowsiness lifted like a hand. Henry rushed almost at a run to the opposite side of the building where his son's room was. "Joe, what's wrong?" The loud sounds, like the banging of a heavy object, came again. Then Sarah shouted, "Gina, Felix, where have you all gone?" Henry felt a chill go through him. His imagination immediately began to paint the most horrible pictures. He ran into his son's room and almost fell down, bumping into a powerful obstacle in the form of Sarah. The woman had worked in the businessman's home for almost 15 years. She did the bookkeeping and supervised the staff. Thanks to her skillful work, the owner and his son were surrounded by the comforts of home. "Henry, you almost knocked me over. I can't get a hold of those freeloaders. I'd advise you to look for other guards." All this advice Sarah was giving out in the middle of the day. She was trying to lift Joe. The young man was lying on the floor. He was pale, but from his rapid breathing, his father realized that he was alive. The man rushed to the son. "Joe, what's wrong? Wake up." Sarah reassured the owner. "Do not worry, now he will wake up. I didn't realize what happened when I heard the crash. I guess Joe decided to walk on his own, but he didn't realize his strength and fell. Sarah gestured at the crutches. Should we call an ambulance? Joe objected. No ambulance. The sight of white coats already gives me the creeps. The woman wheeled a wheelchair over to where the young man had fallen, and Henry helped him up. Joe, why are you doing this? The doctor told you. Pa, I don't know who to listen to anymore. Some doctors say that every movement is bad for me, and others, on the contrary, advise me to be more active. And I myself, I can't accept my helplessness. I don't need you to comfort me. Henry raised his voice so that Sarah flinched. Stop being hysterical and be a man. Yes, disaster has happened to you, but that doesn't mean life is over. Joe looked at his father in surprise as he continued. I'll tell you without doctors that you can't get discouraged. You have to believe in yourself. How many examples are there when doctors made not a comforting prognosis and a person, against all odds, got back on his feet? Dad, those cases are rare. I could take after this truly courageous man, but I have a very different diagnosis. I know you have multiple sclerosis, but people with this disease live, work, and even have children. Joe laughed hysterically. Dad, you want to hurt me on purpose. You know very well that we broke up with May, or to be more precise, she left me. So what? She's not the end of the world? Let her go. Loud footsteps were heard in the corridor. Sarah commented. They're running. 2 young men, identical from the face. One of the guards said in an apologetic tone, My colleague and I just stepped out for a moment. Henry gave the stocky man a stern look from head to toe. You'll have a lot of free time now. You're fired. And so is your buddy. You can tell him. I need reliable help, not slackers. Goodbye. The guard just stood in the doorway. Joe decided to stick up for the boys. Dad, the boys had nothing to do with it. I had them escorted out so they wouldn't have to watch my every move. In fact, I don't understand why I need such an escort if I can't leave the house. The contract was for these lazy bums to make sure you got out and about in the city. And I mistakenly thought that you would be comfortable in the company of young and sturdy guys. Sarah shook her head. Joe didn't need the company of jocks, but a good caregiver. The businessman looked at his assistant with interest. Perhaps you're right. And how did I not think of that before? Joe tried to get to his feet, but he failed. He slapped his hand on the arm of the chair with irritation. The thing that annoys me the most is that everyone's so excited about the details of my life, but I'm not asked. I don't need a nurse. I feel like I'm terminally ill right now, and you're trying to convince me, Dad, that I have a future. Joe forcefully turned his vehicle around. Okay, show's over. I need to be alone. All the visitors, including Henry himself, hurry out of Joe's room. Left alone with his thoughts, the young man began to beat his fists on the armrest. Why? Why am I being punished for this? Henry, despite his constant workload, had always tried to maintain a healthy lifestyle. It was something he taught his son from childhood. Since Kaylee had no time to raise Joe, he decided to do it himself. The boy attended gymnasium, and the physical education teacher immediately appreciated the good physical shape of the kid. Your son's reactions are excellent, and his coordination is good. I'd advise you, Henry, to take the boy to the coach of the children's team. We have a big gap in hockey today, so we need talented kids. The teacher himself called his buddy who coached the kids' team, and he set up an appointment. The boy immediately liked everything, and the uniform, and the real hockey stick, and the guys. While his father talked to the coach, he had time to get acquainted with everyone. Then Joe excitedly told his father, Dad, you have no idea that these boys have been practicing for 2 whole years. They even went to the big puck tournament and won. Do you want to be on their team? You're asking me. I just used to think that for hockey you have to grow up first. It seems to me, too, that I'm still too young for such a sport. If Mom finds out, she'll be shocked, because hockey is not a safe sport. Joe grabbed his father's hand and looked at him pleadingly. Dad, we won't tell Mom yet, we'll keep it a secret. And then when they get their medal, we'll tell her everything, and she won't be mad. Henry knew he didn't have to go along with that suggestion. Son, you know it's wrong to lie, right? Dad, we're not gonna lie, we're just not gonna tell Mom. She doesn't know we went to the gym. Yeah, son. I don't think she's interested right now. Our mom's got a defense coming up. So Callie was left in the dark for a long time about what Joe did in his spare time. Twice a week, the businessman took his little boy to the gym. After training, the boy was overflowing with emotion. My coach praised me today, said that I will make a great striker. Congratulations, but you realize that in any business you need perseverance. Yes, Dad, the coach told us that hard work and only hard work can make a master out of a slacker. The man laughed heartily. Good for your coach. Do you even know what the word slacker means? Our teacher calls us that all the time, he says. Reward me with a whole class of slackers. Joe humorously parodied his class teacher, and Henry couldn't help laughing. One day after practice, the son declared, "Now I have a real friend. His name is Harry. Too bad he's at a different school." How did that get in the way of a real friendship? The boy shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. But Harry said I'm lucky because I go to grammar school, and he has to go to a normal school because his dad works in a factory. What a silly thing to say. Remember, son, that it's not the place that beautifies a person, but on the contrary, a person decorates the place of work or service with his work. Take you, for example. If you persistently train, you'll get into the junior team. And then you will play in adult hockey. You will play at championships. That's great. That's great. Mom and I will be proud of your achievements. The boy sighed. When it will have to wait so long. By the way, your Harry can have a dizzying career too, if he tries hard enough. Joe perked up. Great. I'll be sure to tell him at the next training session, because he gets nervous when things don't work out. But if Joe gave everything easy, Harry would squeak to overcome the difficulties of big sports. He diligently imitated his friend in everything, but it did not help him to reach the high bar, which has already overcome Joe. Coach felt sorry for the boy and encouraged him in everything. One day, the top brass showed up at practice. But come on, coach, brag about your achievements. The coach arranged a demonstration tournament for the guests and friends, specially identified in different teams. This trick was hidden in the coach's plan, to show his Diamond E. Joe to the knowledgeable people. The guests watched the match with passion and cheered for Joe's team. Coach, that boy is a real talent. How old is he? 14. A little early for the junior varsity. Rules are there to be broken, and sometimes you can and should make exceptions for a kid's height. He's got the physique of a 16-year-old. They're all growing like broilers these days. That's good. Can I talk to your pupil? Sure, yeah. And that player number 11, I would put him in defense or even remove him from the field. He's a little weak, he fusses a lot, but he plays quite well for amateur hockey. Harry hadn't heard what they were saying about his abilities, but he noticed that the chief guest had taken Joe out of the locker room with him. Envy had long ago settled in the teenager's soul, but he hid it skillfully, and this time he couldn't help it. That's it, it's gone. Now Joe would get his nose in the air. Nick looked at the boy contemptuously. Joe deserved it. He's a great striker. You should be happy for your friend, Harry, but you're making jokes. What are you jealous of? Mind you, it's an incurable disease and it always ends badly. Soon Joe's life changed dramatically. He was named to the junior varsity squad, despite his age. He also had to change his grammar school to a school for rising athletes. As the training schedule became tighter, the family had to move to the capital. Henry was proud of his son, but his father's life was overshadowed by the fact that he almost never saw him. However, still once he managed to carve out time to attend a training session. The man was very surprised when he recognized Harry among the players of the team. In the evening, he asked his son, I see that your friend is not lagging behind you. Joe was somehow embarrassed by this remark. Sort of. Harry is trying, so the coach decided to keep him as a substitute, but they don't take him to serious tournaments. Doesn't he take offense at this selective treatment? Joe looked at his father strangely again. In big sports, there is no place for resentment and relationship troubles. Here you have to defend the honor of the team. Is that what your coach says? The boy laughed. My dad's a different coach now, but he's not a man to be trifled with. He always has some jokes and quips on his tongue. Coach often visits us, is very worried about us, says that we are his own children. It is good when you meet such people as your coach. Our new coach is a nice guy too, but Harry's not crazy about him. What's your friend's problem with the new coach? Dad, is pretty clear. The old coach felt sorry for Harry and the new coach is running him around like a dog. Of course, Harry doesn't like that, and he's mad at everybody. There's nothing you can do about it. You said yourself that in sports the strongest wins. Why do you call your coach such a frivolous name? He wanted it that way. I am the youngest in the team, and all the guys are older than me. Many of them are studying in institutes. By the way, the coach himself is also a student. He is only 28. He switched to coaching after the injury, but he cannot accept it. But to bring up future champions, it is also an honorable job for a laugh. But this time his laughter was light, which said that the guy is also happy at heart. Dad, you're having an interesting conversation today, as if you've learned the headlines from the newspapers in advance. I'm sorry, son. Our generation was brought up on other ideals, and we once sincerely believed in an apple tree on Mars, and in communism on the whole planet, and in many other things. Joe often hinted at his father's different perceptions of the world around him, but Henry never took offense at such remarks. He was pleased that his son was trying to understand him, not ridicule old-fashioned attitudes. In turn, the businessman also always listened attentively to the boy, which helped him to look at the world through his son's eyes. Probably, this is what became a solid foundation for their real friendship. Joe had no secrets from his father, and Henry tried to reciprocate. But still, a huge black cat ran between them one day, and its shadow remained for the rest of their lives. And the culprit was the same Harry. Success in sports did not pass for Joe without a trace. He was invited to various TV programs, interviewed. Numerous female fans from different parts of the country sent him fiery letters. The popularity of this friend frankly envied Harry. Joe, you should be casting so many good-looking girls around you. You think I like that? But you gotta respect the groupies. That's not what I'd do if I were you. I wonder if you could give me some advice. I'd have some kind of tricky contest for them, and the one who wins would be honored to spend the evening or night with me. Joe looked at his comrade. Harry, I hope you're joking. No, I'm dead serious. Think of the life you could have. A new chick every day, adult paychecks, honors everywhere, camera flashes. Are you jealous of me? We're friends, Harry. I always thought you'd be happy for me, but you're just holding a pebble in your pocket like this. I didn't expect that. Harry tried to play it off, but Joe realized that he'd been doing the masterful job of being a friend all these years. After that incident, he avoided Harry's company, which only made him angrier. His teammates also began to notice the split, but it was not customary to discuss such delicate topics in news circles. The situation resolved itself. One of the fans of the young hockey player was particularly persistent, and inexperienced Joe could not resist her fanatical devotion. The girl named Ilona studied at one of the capital's universities and already considered herself the bride of a famous athlete. Although Joe liked her, but still he did not dare to introduce his father to his beloved. It is not known how the further fate of the guy would have developed, if not for the intervention of Harry. Failures in the sports field a little cooled down the ambitious young man, and he decided to try his hand at business. And in this direction, Harry did much better. Although former friends crossed rarely, he knew about the recent changes in Joe's life. And one day fate gave the envious man a chance to avenge his past humiliations. Harry, through acquaintances, got a job in a reputable firm, but he did not know that the owner of the enterprises is Joe's father. When the guy sent to the main office with a report, he quite by accident ran into Henry in the doorway, who was in a hurry somewhere. Surprisingly, the businessman recognized him at once. Harry, what are you doing here? Hello, Henry. I'm working here. I just got a new job. What about sports? I'm a realist, so I chose something I'm good at. You did the right thing. Okay, I'm in a hurry. We'll talk more when we get a chance. Harry decided to strike while the iron was still in the shop. There'd be a chance soon, because Joe was getting married. This news stunned the businessman, and he dropped the folder with papers out of surprise. The papers flew in different directions, and Harry obligingly rushed to pick them up. Henry thanked the boy for his help. I really don't have time right now, but I'll be free in 2 hours. I'll be waiting for you. But I've got work to do, discipline first. I'll take care of it. I'll see you in 2 hours. Harry's soul rejoiced. He realized that Henry was not aware of his son's affairs of the heart and would probably not approve of his choice. The young schemer was a pretty good judge of character. Indeed, Joe's father was surprised, to say the least, by the details of his son's private life. In the evening of the same day, a serious conversation took place. "Joe, why am I the last to know that you're getting married?" Henry immediately began with a high note, so Joe answered him in the same spirit. "And I did not know that I am obliged to report to you about their personal affairs. And I'm very curious as to where that information came from. Are you following me? I'm a father, and I care about my only son. Even if I put you under surveillance, I have every right to do so. Even so, Dad, I respect you a lot, but in this situation, you're wrong. I'm not a boy anymore. I can take charge of my own life, and I suggest you don't listen to the gossip mongers. Yes, I'm seeing the girl, but it's a little too soon to tell you." Henry was a little relieved by this assurance, but just in case, he decided to take the girl his son was interested in out of the game. The businessman personally met with Alona, and in this he was helped by Harry. The girl, to attract a lot of broken, but receiving an envelope solid reward, accordingly nodded her head. "Good, I promise that I will not be in the capital tomorrow." Alona kept her word, but still before leaving she called Joe and told him that her mother was seriously ill. This girl never appeared in his life again. Joe did not grieve for long over Alona's sudden disappearance. He did not think about the reasons for her departure, because his main goal in life was sports. To achieve something, it was necessary to keep in good shape, and it was impossible without intensive training. Henry practically did not see his son and missed him very much. The only entertainment of the businessman was work. Once at the presentation of a new line of products of the company approached him. Their companies were competing, so Henry was immediately wary, anticipating a catch. But Matthew was very friendly. "Good for you, Henry. I've been keeping a close eye on your company's affairs. You realize that market conditions make a lot of difference today." The businessman didn't understand where Matthew, about whom many people spoke unflatteringly, wanted to take him. But the rules of etiquette had to be observed, and the man had to support his interlocutor. "I agree with you completely, Matthew. But as far as I know, your business is also on the rise." "No, that's an exaggeration. It's so hard to get things done. You have to adjust to the partners. I don't like that. We'd all depend on circumstances and other people, but sometimes we can turn things around. It's a pity we don't always take that chance. Prejudices get in the way, or other circumstances. Yes, modern business is a sea in which those who cannot swim quickly drown." Matthew's face brightened. He realized that his symbol-filled speech had achieved his purpose. Henry had figured out the old fox from the second move, but he had purposely shown incomprehension so that he would reveal himself even more. Matthew took 2 glasses of champagne from the tray. "I propose we drink to the professionals. I must admit that I am always pleased to see a worthy opponent, and at times like this, for some reason, I want to turn the chessboard over. Do you wish to start the game anew or something else?" "Other. I'm always in favor of useful alliances. I think, Henry, we have a lot to discuss. Of course, if you don't mind." "I don't mind, Matthew, but you realize that players on the same team have to keep their cards open for their partner." "I see your point. I guarantee you honesty on my part. Oh, by the way, I've been meaning to ask you, how's your son? His portrait's been in the headlines. I hear he's in the Legionnaires now." "Yeah, he's got a 2-year contract with the Wines, but Joe's been approached by other clubs, but the Finns offered more. I don't know the details, but that must have been the case. You see, dear Henry, business has penetrated even into sports, but I think it's fair when a man wants to convert his achievements into money. After all, athletes sacrifice the most important things: health, personal life, and many other benefits. Believe me, I know this kitchen well because I have been in it with my son for 6 years. Although I have a daughter, but also does not let me and my wife relax. The girl is spoiled beyond belief and so hard-headed that nothing can move her." The topic of children immediately brought the 2 businessmen together, and soon they began to think about a plan to merge the 2 companies into one whole. The final stage of the deal took place just before Christmas, and the partners decided to celebrate the event together. Joe was greatly surprised when father said they would be spending Christmas at Matthew's. "Pa, but I had very different plans, and I think it's no longer proper at my age to walk hand in hand with my father." "Joe, you've been so obnoxious lately. I'm just asking you." "Well, if it's that important to you, I'll put up with it for a while. I was gonna spend the holiday with the boys though. We haven't seen each other in ages, and this is the chance. You'll get to see your friends and girlfriends. Oh, by the way, Harry works for me. I know. He's a very promising young man. Good for him. The mention of an ex-friend spoiled Joe's mood immediately. Many times he caught himself thinking that a former friend was interfering in his life, willingly or unwillingly. Matthew's house had made a strong impression on Joe, though he himself was accustomed to a penniless life. But he, his father's newly minted companion, was a clear fan of luxurious living. The glitz and glitter soon made the young man's eyes water. But that was the beginning of the ordeal. When he saw May, Matthew's daughter, completely lost in space, unlike her mother, who shone like a Christmas tree, the girl was dressed modestly, but it was a very expensive simplicity. It was no surprise to May that her appearance made such a strong impression on Joe. She was used to being the center of attention and immediately set about winning another man's heart. I've wanted to meet you for a long time. Unfortunately, there are no real champions in my circle of friends. The guy responded to the compliments. Among my acquaintances, too, there is no such a beautiful girl. You look so much like a stranger from the painting of a famous artist. Krama. Oh, you're interested in painting? Not really. It's just that a lot of people have told me you look like the young lady who once was the painter. Of course, I'm fine and all, but it's nice to be like famous people. I think it's much nicer to do something yourself that makes you be remembered. It's easy for you to talk, and you get written about and talked about, and I'm just an ordinary girl, and I don't have any special talents. Do you dream of fame? Who doesn't? You know, popularity is rather burdensome than useful once in sight. Any move you make can be misinterpreted, but the sad thing is that fame is a fleeting thing. It is like gilding, it comes off, and the one who was the variola of that fame is then left in oblivion. May looked at Joe with wide open eyes. You surprise me. I always thought sport was brute force. The young man laughed. That is universally mistaken, but even in extremely forceful disciplines, you have to include brains, not to mention hockey. Joe passionately told May about the strategy of the game. She listened to him with bated breath. The parents watched the young people with fascination, and Matthew even wept a little. What a beautiful couple, and they immediately found mutual understanding. I don't recognize my daughter, he said with so much sincerity that Henry believed him. He didn't know that Matthew had made preparations with his daughter the night before. May had at first resented the very fact that she must sacrifice her freedom for her father's affairs. But when the stern parent threatened her with forfeiture of her allowance, the girl gave in. And when she saw Joe, she became indescribably delighted. May whispered in her father's ear, "Daddy, thank you. That hockey player is a real sweetheart. He's a man and you're talking about him as a woman. It doesn't make any difference. For your information, honey, this guy is not only good looking, he's expensive. He's got the best clubs in the world fighting over him." May realized she had to fight for her happiness, but the girl did not have to fight off hundreds of fans, because Joe himself gave up. For 2 weeks of daily meetings, they managed to get so close that he did not want to part. May looked at the boy with loving eyes and whispered, "Only now do I realize what true love is. Joe, we were made for each other. I knew it right away too, the moment I first saw you. But I've got another training camp and a big game coming up. I'd love to cancel, but I can't cancel my contract." "Are you gonna get punished?" Joe jokingly rolled his eyes. "You have no idea what that would mean for me. I'd have to pay a huge penalty. And if a person gets sick, for example, a serious injury. In hockey, you have these sticks, pucks. Everything is very tough. Even illness is not a mitigating circumstance. Of course, here at home, the conditions are milder, but the life of a legionnaire is not so favorable. Then I don't understand why you agreed to play for a foreign club. It's regrettable to admit it, but for a sportsman, it's not so much money as prestige that matters. Although money is also a weighty argument, but still the opportunity to play for a famous team is a real treat, so we try not to pay attention to injuries. Have you often had such cases?" "I can't say that it happened often. Back when I was in juniors, I seriously hurt my knee, but just little things. Bruises when falling or one of my teammates inadvertently hit me with a stick. I didn't realize it was so dangerous. Big sport is not for the faint of heart, and you were right to point out that it's not safe. Joe was touched that May was interested in his affairs and genuinely worried about him. He realized that he wished she was always there for him. The parents of the lovers were delighted with their decision to become one family. The wedding was noisy and crowded, and the rich ceremony was written in secular publications. Disappointed fans desperately envied the chosen one of the famous athlete. But the honeymoon flew by, and it turned out that both were not ready for family life. Or rather, each had his own idea of it. Accustomed to a luxurious life, May began to express dissatisfaction on any occasion. She didn't like the fact that her husband was always at the training camp, but at the same time her comfortable existence required a lot of money. For this reason, Joe was forced to sign a new contract at the end of one. But he was also not satisfied with the idle life of the young spouse. He began to get rumors that May during his absence entertained to the fullest. The situation heated up and once resulted in a loud scandal. Joe was the first to express his displeasure. "May, you and I have been married for 3 years. It's time to think about a child." The young woman weighed as if she was stung by a snake. "To have children, you must first provide for their future." "May, for God's sake, isn't it enough that I earn enough?" The woman laughed hysterically. "Can't these miserable crumbs you bring in be enough? It seems to me you could earn a lot more if it weren't for your modesty." "What do you mean?" "It's simple. You need to raise the stakes and you're willing to sweat for someone else's team for cents." "May, you amaze me. If my salary looks like a dime to you, then how much do you think is appropriate? Aren't your demands a little too high? Maybe it's time to temper your appetite a little. It's not like I'm gonna be running around with a stick forever. I'll soon be 30 and will have to give up big sports." The woman's outraged. She's running around the room. "And you're talking about kids. If we have a family, that goes without saying. Of course, I'll go to a coaching job and we'll live like everyone else." "I don't want to live like everyone else, and I'm not going to breed poverty either." The outburst of emotions was so strong that May could not stand it and cried like a schoolgirl. Joe did not soothe his wife, as he had done before. He left home and spent the whole day at the sports school where his start, big sport, had once taken place. The coach rejoiced at the visit of this former pupil. They talked for a long time about sports and just about life. Then Joe offered the coach to give him a ride home. He agreed. Almost all the way the old coach was silent and only at his home sadly remarked, "I was very happy to meet you. Thank you for not forgetting me, but I don't like it. Joe, the way you look very tired, like a lemon that's been put through a juicer. Go away before it's too late. You can't go out on the ice like that." Joe himself felt he wasn't in the best shape, but he couldn't leave because of his contract for 2 more years. "I thought I'd be fine. Everything would work out, and then I'd give up on my career. But fate ordered otherwise." No sooner had Joe joined the new team than he had health problems. First, his hands began to tremble, then added weakness in his legs. The man wrote it all off to fatigue and did not say anything to the team doctor. But when the picture in front of his eyes began to blur, he realized that it was serious. For some time, he managed to hide his poor health, but at one important match against the background of excitement, all the symptoms worsened, and Joe could not play at full strength. After the match, he had to listen to a lot of hurtful words in his address, and the captain warned in broken language, "One more stunt like that and you're out of the team." Joe tried to explain to him that he wasn't exactly feeling well. "I don't care about your problems. You've been paid big money for." Joe sought help from the medic who monitored the player's health. The man examined him for a long time, shaking his head. "Bad. Your business, Joe. You should be yelling guard." "Why?" "I can't, as you say, see what's wrong. But if you don't get treatment right now, it's gonna end very badly. That's why I came to you, Doc. You give me some pills, I'll take them. I can't quit now." The medic, understanding again, nodded baldness, covered with a narrow, colorful cap. "I understand. Forfeit." "That's right, Doc. You know how much the owner will screw me." The doctor rummaged in his safe for a long time, then pulled out a jar of pills. "Here you go, Joe, but no more than 1 pill a day." I got it. The pills helped a lot at first. Joe felt a surge of energy and was quite aggressive on the field. But the boost didn't last long, so he decided to double the dosage himself. But it didn't help. Once during a match, his legs refused to obey Joe. He collapsed on the ice and could not get up. Only a few days he was kept in the hospital, but since the treatment was paid, he had to continue it at home. Henry was shocked when he found out what had happened to his son. Joe was treated in one of the best clinics in the capital, and after just a few days he learned that he had multiple sclerosis. The attending physician spoke of the dreaded disease as if it were something ordinary. "I'm sorry, my friend, but you can forget about sports forever. The most important thing now is to preserve your quality of life." This was the first time Joe had heard this term, so he asked the doctor to explain more. He fixed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and patiently explained, "I do not want to scare you, but the results of the examination showed that the pathological process has long been started in your body. Perhaps the cause was an injury, which is often the case with athletes, or diseases passed on to you by inheritance. That's out of the question. Everyone in our family is strong. My father hardened me from childhood and taught me to play sports. That's good, of course, but no one is immune to illness. We, doctors, also get sick, again, to my great regret. But not everything is as hopeless as it may seem at first glance. People with such a diagnosis as yours live full lives. But your case is a bit unusual, so the prognosis is not so comforting." "Doctor, I don't understand you. One minute you're saying I'm almost healthy, the next you're predicting the next." "Joe, you take it easy. We'll be watching you. It's the most ungrateful thing you can do." Joe spent almost a month in the clinic, but his improvement was short-lived. He had to move in with his father because May was horrified when she saw him in his helpless state. "God, what's all this on my poor head? No kids, Joe. When you need help yourself. Thank you, wife, for your support. I wouldn't expect anything else from you. Of course, and don't you dare judge me, because I warned you right away that I don't want to do anything. I don't need anything from you anymore. It's just a shame I didn't see you for the carefree insect you are. I thought you were human. Now you're insulting me in my house. Don't worry, May. I won't be here anymore." Joe moved in with his father, and soon the news came that he was being sued. The reason for the lawsuit was failure to fulfill the terms of the contract. The amount of compensation was several times the fee he had received, but Henry paid it all in full. "I don't want to see you dragged through the courts like this." "Thanks, Dad. I gotta get out of this trap." "You have to. There's no other way. And you can always count on my help." Joe began to get used to his new surroundings, but it was May who spoiled it. Just before Christmas, she showed up at the country estate to give her husband another scandal. Henry was away at the time, but Sarah witnessed an unpleasant scene. May attacked Joe from the doorstep, regardless of his condition. "You've made yourself comfortable. Nice house, servants, and a wheelchair to top off the scenery. An oil painting." Joe tried to keep his cool. "Do you find my helplessness funny?" "But come on, how could I? I'm supposed to cry and wail. May, tell me straight out why you came here. You still have the nerve to ask that. You left me destitute." "All right, well, you don't have to go on. You need money." "That's right. I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. As you can see, I'm in a bad place myself. You should think about getting a job or let your dad support you. It's not up to you." May had mustered the strength to make one last complaint. "Joe, you can still get me back, but you need money to do that, don't you?" The woman nodded in agreement, not suspecting a trick in the question. Joe wheeled his wheelchair closer to her, and she fearfully started to back away. "May, I have a counter-proposal for you. You can have me back too. If you agree to move into this house for a while to help your father a little." With nowhere else to go, the woman hit the wall. "You're just offering me to be your nurse? But you're my wife. You're not a stranger." "Oh no, I can't. I'm not ready for that." Sarah saw May storm out of Joe's room as she ran past her, and she couldn't help it. "Bitch," an absorbent cotton doll. May turned around. "Are you talking to me?" "You, who else?" May screamed hysterically. "Freak house. How did I not realize it in the first place?" Sarah threw open the front doors. "Come on, madam, get out of here. And I don't recommend you come here again." Cursing her life and the people in the house, May got into the car and sped toward the gate. Contrary to the doctor's positive assertions, Joe's condition was rapidly deteriorating. Weakened body and stress played a cruel joke on the athlete. He picked up a cold. For 3 days, the guy burned and fevered, and the doctor who arrived on a call with his hands folded. "I'm sorry to tell you, but things are bad. In addition to the underlying illness, he had a cold." Where could he have gotten it? Joe himself answered the doctor's question. "A couple days ago, some friends came to visit me. Yeah, and spring is flu season, so what's the point of sitting around like a hermit in the first place? If you want to keep what health you have left, you have to make sacrifices." "Doctor, my life these past few months has been all about sacrifice. Tell me, what's the point of living at all?" The doctor didn't answer the question and quickly left. Henry volunteered to accompany him. "Doctor, I'm desperate. I need your advice on what to do. The best doctors have seen my son and the professor, but everything is at the same point." The district doctor squinted his eyes. "You know, I'm not a professor, but I will say that everything depends on the desire of the patient. Your son himself does not want or is not in the mood for recovery. So what do we do? You have to motivate him. He's an athlete. That's the kind of person who's driven to succeed, and our patient needs to be motivated to do the same. But it's up to you how you do it. In my experience, even a little success can work wonders. Push him. Do not give him free minutes, that is, deprive the guy of any opportunity to plunge into his dull thoughts. If I were you, I'd hire a nurse, preferably a young and pretty girl." Henry was surprised. Does age and sex matter? It does. After all, a young man, even a sick one, would not want to show his weakness to a lady. I may be wrong, but this is all based on my personal observations. All day, Henry pondered over the doctor's strange recommendation, and in the evening he invited Sarah into his office. "I'm not at all comfortable giving you such an assignment. I'm very afraid of being misunderstood." "Henry, don't bother. I heard everything last night." The doctor was talking very loudly, so it was impossible not to hear him. "What do you say? About his suggestion or about the nurse?" "Both. Of course, I don't know much about medicine, but I think our doctor's advice should be heeded. At the very least, it's worth a shot. I think I have a candidate in mind." Henry's revitalized. "That's a good place to start. Don't get too excited. You may not be happy with this girl. All right, I don't want to beat around the bush. My niece Kate, a nurse by training, worked at the clinic for 4 years after college, but something happened there. I don't know exactly. In short, the girl was forbidden to practice her profession, but she can be a nurse and she's proud. She didn't take kindly to her employer." "And where does she work now?" "Up nowhere. She's a paper courier, and I have to do all the work." Sarah was ready to tell the owner about her hard life with all the details, but he impatiently interrupted the woman. "Let your niece come tomorrow. In principle, I have no choice. If the girl has worked, then she has some experience. Yeah, she gives me massages and knows what pills to pop when my blood pressure spikes." "Okay, we have a deal." "Of course, I can't say no to you, Henry. You're like family to me, and I'm so worried about Joe. I mean, I watched him grow up." Sarah lived on the other side of the village and had to walk a decent distance every day. But on this night, she was racing home. Her heart was filled with a double joy. First, she had a chance to get a job for her niece, who had been in her care almost since she was a baby. And second, she could finally arrange her personal life. This energetic woman had a man in mind who was paying attention to her. But the beau did not have his own place, so they had to meet secretly. Sarah bustled into the house, barely able to catch her breath. Kate. The niece had never seen her aunt in such a state and was frightened. "Aunt Sarah, what's the matter with you? Is something wrong?" "It happened, Kate. I found a job for you with money." The girl's face blushed. "Are you kidding me?" "I'm not kidding. True, you may not be satisfied with such a position, but on the fish list, as they say, do not choose." The girl began to shake the aunt. "What are you all talking in riddles?" On purpose decided to help me. "Let me catch my breath, then I'll tell you everything. I already got dinner ready. I just got my paycheck today." "And how much?" The girl doomed squeezed out, $3,000. "Yes, poorly paid for your services, but nothing. Soon you'll be like a cheese and butter." Sarah expected her niece to dance with joy, but Kate, on the contrary, became sad. Her aunt even took offense to that reaction. "I rode like a dragon horse across the village to cheer you up, and you didn't even smile." Of course, it's a shame for you to be a nurse. Auntie, what are you talking about? A nurse only has a white coat, and sometimes you have to do such work that a normal person would shudder. I was upset for another reason. What if your Henry calls the clinic and finds out about me? Let him call, although I don't think he will, because my businessman is a very decent man. And why are you so afraid? You still haven't told me what you've done to upset your boss. You could at least tell me now so I know. I'm not comfortable telling you about these things. Sarah drew the girl to her and stroked her flaxen hair like a little girl. You silly girl. I'm your mother, so I'm allowed to tell you everything. The girl stretched and her eyes glistened. Everything was fine until this patient showed up in our ward. His last name is Stark. Wait, isn't that the Stark? It is, Aunt Sarah. But he was still in his position at the time. They took him off after he got drunk and drove. He was on TV, the creep. He came to us with a heart attack and he had his eye on me. What a bastard. I had a hankering for strawberries. He's already 50 years old. 47 according to his passport. Anyway, he began to me first all sorts of compliments obscene to make and then did not give a pass. I had to ask the girls when I had to go to his room. After all, he was treated in a single room. And what happened next? If I ever found out he hurt you, I'll do it with my own hands. Kate smiled through her tears. I may look frail, but I could stand up for myself. Anyway, this Stark guy started complaining to the chief about me for being rude to patients. Our head of the department did a preventive work with me, and I promised that it will not happen again. And then I was on night duty and the bastard pretended to be sick. And he chose the right moment when I was alone at the post, and as it should be in such situations with a resuscitation kit, flew into the room and he put me on the bed. I'm still disgusted. Sarah froze. Now I understand why you didn't say anything. Auntie, at least listen to the end. I had the tray in my hands, so I hit him right in the face with my knee in the most vulnerable place. Good for you. That's what you think? Stark howled, bent over, and blood gushed from his nose, broken by the tray. Of course, everyone came running, but no one would listen to me. They believed the goat that I deliberately attacked him. But do you get a wolf ticket for that? Of course, there is such an article, incompatibility with the position held. But the head decided not to bring the case to court and offered me to resign of my own accord. True, I still spoiled my work record book. Why didn't you tell me this before? I would have told you about Stark. I was just embarrassed, the woman cried. And tell me, where is the justice in having the conscience to hurt an orphan? Sarah was impressed by her niece's story. She cried for a long time, remembering how she raised one niece. They sister orphaned when the younger girl was only 7 years old. Sarah was 12 years older than the little girl. For the sake of her little sister, she had to quit her studies and give up her personal life. But that instead of gratitude brought her only grief and shame. Sarah could not keep track of her sister, and she fell into a bad company. The girl began to come home in the morning and she smelled of booze. Sarah tried to talk some sense into the girl. She cried, promised to improve, but it all happened again. And then she announced she was having a baby. Noticing how her sister's face changed, the future mother calmed her down. Don't worry, sister. I'll give up the baby right away. Why would I do that? I'll go to the city and get a job there. This revelation shocked the woman. How dare you say that? People are suffering for years, cannot give birth to a child, and you have already planned in advance to abandon his own blood. And it was especially hurtful to hear such reasoning, because for the sake of her sister's future, she gave up her happiness as a woman. But she was not up to her older sister's worries. She barely waited for the birth, and then immediately went into all the hard work. Kate was only 5 months old when the men in uniform came to the house. You need to come with us for a lineup. Sarah felt a chill go through her. What happened? You were told to come to the lineup. Your sister may be dead. Sarah recognized her sister immediately by the flower tattoo on her arm. She remembers the coroner offering her condolences and then saying regretfully, she should have lived on, so young and beautiful. And it was all the damn booze's fault. The woman was afraid to look at her sister's lifeless body and only asked, did she poison herself? If only. Can't you see she's all messed up? They must have gotten drunk, and there was a conflict with all the tragic consequences. Kate's been in her aunt's care ever since, but Sarah never told the girl under what circumstances her mother died. She did not want to traumatize the child's soul. The aunt generally tried to keep her niece out of trouble, and until sometime I succeeded. Kate grew up an obedient girl and pleased her aunt's success in school. It was on her advice that she entered medical school. This profession, Kate, is tailor-made for you. You're pathetic. Nurses don't do anything special. They flit around the wards in their white coats, giving shots in the soft spot. Only later, during the internship, Kate realized how wrong her aunt was, but she is not accustomed to retreat in the face of difficulties, and soon she loved her job with all her soul. In the morning, Henry waited for his housekeeper on the first floor. He noticed from afar that Sarah was accompanied by a fragile girl. She's just a child. What kind of nurse would she be? But the businessman's disappointment was quickly replaced by admiration. Kate politely said hello and leisurely took off her light coat. The landlord suggested, "Let me take you to our sick man." "Okay, but I have to wash my hands first." Sick people who have to stay within four walls are very weak, so they can easily catch an infection. Joe wasn't expecting visitors in the morning, so he was reading the first book he could find in bed. When Kate carefully opened the door, he thought he was dreaming, because the novel described a similar scene. He stared into the girl's face, and she blushed with embarrassment. "Hello, Joe." "Hello. Are you a fairy or a star that got lost in the sky?" "No, son, this is your assistant, and her name is..." Joe didn't immediately notice his father and Sarah because all his attention was on the pretty stranger. To his father's remarks, he jokingly objected. "Dad, wait. I have to guess the name of this nymph who jumped off the pages of the book I'm reading myself." Henry wanted to interrupt his son, but Sarah gave him such an expressive look that he stopped talking. Joe glanced at the open page, then back at the girl. In my story, Kate came to the hero. He waited for her, and she came. The girl smiled. "My name is Kate, too." The witnesses to this touching scene looked at each other and decided they had better remove themselves. Henry whispered, "There's something magical about that girl. I didn't expect her to win me over with one look, and I haven't seen Joe in such high spirits in a long time. Maybe the doctor's right." "It's too early to tell. We'll see." The young men studied each other in silence for a long time. Joe was the first to break this long pause. "Perhaps we should get to know each other better. A star named Kate." The girl laughed. "Why do you call me that?" "If you don't mind, I won't." "I don't mind. But you know, appearances can be very deceiving." "So you're saying that underneath the blonde nymph is a monster?" "No, I don't want to scare you, but I'm definitely not Cinderella. Let's say I'm not a prince either. But what made you come all the way out here to visit a secluded hermit?" "I wasn't forced to, and it wasn't a long journey. I came here to help you." "Well, you've ruined the whole fairy tale. But I'm still willing to obey you, if only for today." This is already good, because sometimes one day means much more than a whole year. Joe and his father were soon convinced of the justice of this remark. All day long, Kate spent her days by Joe's side. She gave him massages, then made him do special exercises. Daily walks were also part of the recovery package. But Kate had a lot of questions when she saw what her ward ate. But it was Sarah who took all the lumps. "Auntie, you do realize that so much meat on one plate is a crime." Joe needed protein when he played sports, but now he needs something lighter. "So don't yell at the lady. Just tell her what she needs. All I've been hearing from you lately is complaints. But what can I do? I created my own problem." Henry was the only one who stayed out of it, but he could see by the revitalized look in his son's eyes that Kate had made him want to live. He came home one evening and couldn't believe his eyes. Joe, leaning lightly on his cane, was strolling down the path that ran along the flower bed. "Pa, you may congratulate me, but I think it's to your credit that it was your idea to bring this wonderful girl into our home." "You're wrong. It was your doctor who suggested it, and I had no other choice. But I don't think you have any regrets." "You're right. I can't believe it wasn't so long ago that I didn't really want to live. Kate promised to show me to some doctor she knows. She says he's really good at this kind of thing." "Now do you believe you can get it all back?" "I do, Dad, and thank you for your patience." Whether it was faith or Kate's effect on Joe, his condition improved every day. They had many conversations with Kate, mostly about what had gone before. Joe felt that he would never tell a single person in his life what he was telling this fragile girl. Kate felt needed another push, something else that would put a stop to the moping and get him moving forward. Kate was sure that all it took was the will. "Henry, can I talk to you?" "Sure, Nadia. Is something wrong?" He took a break from his papers. Lately, he had been doing nothing but trying to fix his firm's affairs after he had paid a huge penalty for his son, and then spent an equally huge sum on his treatment. The firm had sagged, or rather its affairs had sagged. He didn't say anything to Joe and tried not to let anyone else around him notice either. "No, nothing's happened. I'd like to ask you a favor. I need 2 days off. I'll go into town. My girlfriend invited me to a wedding and I'll be right back." Kate was a terrible liar. Henry realized at once that the reason was something else, but he had no right to ask her, much less to distrust her. "All right, Kate, we'll manage. Don't worry." Kate knew where she was going, and she wasn't sure she'd find the man she needed, but she decided to give it a try. Strangely enough, she found the building right away. A few questions to passersby, a little wit, and there she was at the door. She didn't know how to pray, but she whispered, "Lord, let this coach be found." Yes, Kate had traveled to another city to find the very coach Joe respected so much, and he also spoke very warmly of the first trainer, but only this one could help. She spent a long time explaining to the guard exactly who she needed. When he finally understood, he smiled. "That's what they would have said." Kate was surprised. "That's what I said." "No, that's not what you said." The girl was led down some corridors for a long time. Finally, a door opened and a cold smell came over her. "On that bench over there, see?" "Yeah, thank you very much." Coach was surprised. Seeing a frail girl where only men practice was a little unusual. "Are you sure it's for me? If you're the man who trained Joe." "So I heard he retired from the sport, but he broke his contract." "Yeah, he got sick, got real sick, so he broke it." "Come on, girl. Let's go to my office. You can tell me all about it." Kate came back excited. The coach promised to find out something and then be sure to come back. Joe sat in the chair. He walked outside today even without a stick. It was, of course, a little scary. He'd gotten used to it lately, but he wanted to please Kate. His father hadn't been seen all day, though today was a day off and he wasn't going to work. Strangely enough, Sarah hadn't shown up either. Joe got up, decided to go look for them. He found Sarah cooking something in the kitchen, father sitting on the sofa. It was ridiculous, unusual, and Joe couldn't think of anything better to say. "Why are you here?" Joe noticed that his father and Sarah herself looked embarrassed. He looked at his father in surprise, then looked at their housekeeper, and suddenly realized that he had never thought of Sarah as a woman, but she had been. She was already over 40. Who could be older? But she was a very interesting woman, slim, though large brown eyes. Joe hurried out of the kitchen, and Henry thought, "This is all very confusing. Before Kate came along, I had no idea that Sarah was not only kind and smart, but also beautiful." He couldn't explain what Kate had to do with it, but it didn't matter. 3 days after Kate's return, something happened that Joe never dreamed would happen. They had just sat down to tea in the courtyard when the guard came in. "Joe, there's someone here to see you." "Me? Who?" He said it was just Sam. "Coach." Joe looked at Kate, but she was talking to her aunt. So he got up and walked to the gate. "But hello, Joe. I see you're holding up well." He wasn't alone. There was another coach with him. "Where are you from?" "I'm so glad to see you. But will you invite me in?" Of course, come in." They drank tea for a long time, talked about nothing, admired the cakes and flowers. Then they'd all left, leaving Joe with the trainers. "So, Joe, how's it going?" "Well, I'd had worse." "It's good that you're positive, very good. I got a proposition for you." Sam explained that such a high-level hockey player could do a lot more good coaching kids, maybe even adults. But first, he needs to get a feel for the ice again. That's what the coach will help him with. In the meantime, Sam would do some sort of publicity. Joe sat there and couldn't believe his ears. As they were saying goodbye, Joe asked, "Where are you from? How did you even come up with the idea to come here?" "I didn't tell anyone about my illness." Sasha grinned. "Take care of your Kate. She's great." Joe smiled. Yes, that's his Kate. And now he finally realized it. All night he thought about how he would tell Kate. Then he decided to take his time. He would get up a little, start earning money, and then he would propose to her. 2 months later, they first saw a sports ad about Joe coming back to teach new champions. And the next day, as he and Kate were going for a walk, the door swung open and May appeared on the doorstep. "Joe, darling, I've missed you so much." Joe was confused, and before he could push her away, she wrapped her arms around him and kissed him. Kate immediately pulled back and then left the room altogether. Finally, the young man pushed May away. "What do you want? Why did you come here?" "Come on, we all make mistakes. I told you, I'm not a nurse, I'm a wife. You're quite independent now, you'll start earning soon. I think we can be together again. Are you happy? I can see that." She sat down on the sofa, throwing her leg over the leg in a spectacular fashion, and Joe stared at her in amazement. "May, what about Harry? He turned out to be a bastard, offered me a job. Can you imagine that?" "No, I can't even imagine that. Don't sit around. You've got to ride into town." May narrowed her eyes. "What, are you kicking me out or something?" "Exactly, and I wish I'd never seen you again in my life." May realized that her hopes that Joe would cry with joy were not justified. She tried another way. Tears quickly dripped from her eyes. "Joe, honey, all people make mistakes. I'm no exception. I can't be without you, do you understand?" Joe laughed. "I've forgotten what an actress you are. Go away, May, and stay out of my life." The woman jumped up just as Henry entered the room. "You're going to regret this. You're going to regret it. Go home. Daddy's gonna beat your daddy to a pulp. Do you understand?" She grabbed her suitcase and walked proudly past Henry. As soon as the door slammed, he turned to the son. "Joe, what was that?" "I'm afraid, Dad, there's another problem." Joe was right. 3 days later, Matthew informed Henry that he wanted to split the company. "Herman, but you realize it's death to me now, don't you?" "Of course I realize that, Henry. That's why I'm doing this. I'm going to become the sole entrepreneur in this business and fulfill my daughter's request." "What does that have to do with the kids? Besides, you know it was Meg who left Joe when he got sick." "Yeah, you're right. Young women make mistakes, but you have to forgive them. You know what, Matthew? Why don't you and your family all go?" Matthew glared, but Henry was already out. They sat in the yard under the old apple tree together, Joe, Kate, Sarah, and Matthew. There were papers in front of Henry. "Well, Pa, maybe I should try to borrow some money." "No, Joe, let's be logical. You haven't even started work yet. Nobody knows how it's gonna go. Besides, to borrow that kind of money, you'd have to rob a bank." "Is it that bad?" "Well, it's a bust. If we sell this house, the apartment in the city, and the leftovers, whatever Matthew leaves us after he's withdrawn his assets, we have a chance of coming out at zero." Joe whistled. Sarah said out of habit, "Don't bring it down. There won't be any money." Everyone turned to her. The woman realized she'd done something stupid and stood up. "I'll make tea." She was about to leave when a beautiful woman came to the table. They'd been living without a day guard for a few days now. "Hello." Henry looked up and held out his eyes. "Callie." Joe stared at his mother without looking away. He thought he'd never recognize her in his life, but no, he did. "Hello, Henry." "Hello, son." Joe didn't say a word, but Henry stood up, pushed back his chair. "Well, sit down now that you're here. What's the matter? Or did you decide to ruin our lives too, to finish us off, so to speak?" The woman looked at her ex-husband in surprise. "Henry, what's the matter with you? You never gave up." She was silent for a few minutes, as if gathering her thoughts. "I was in the country on business for a while. I met a mutual friend. We sat and talked. I didn't know anything about Joe or what you guys were going through. But I'm not surprised." Joe turned away. "Joe, yes, listen to me, please. I understand who you think I am, but I don't think it would have been better for me to stay. My soul would still be there, and I'd hate you because you wouldn't let me realize my dream. But that's not what I mean. My acquaintance told me everything. Everything. As I understand it right now, the most important thing for you is to save the firm." Henry nodded his head. "Yes, but I don't think we can do that." "Yes, we can. Yes, we can. My husband died, leaving me a very wealthy widow. Besides, I've done some good things for that country myself, and I'm paid very well there. Now, as the hours wore on, I realized that I was terribly lonely. I know exactly how Joe feels about me, and I wouldn't go to you. I want to help. I realize your pride won't allow you to accept money from me. Henry, could this be considered alimony for Joe's entire life? I just don't know how to talk very nice. I haven't been able to give my son the love and care he needs. Let me do at least that. I'm not buying your forgiveness. I'm used to it. Let it be something. She put the envelope down, stood up, and headed for the exit. Joe didn't make it first. Mom, she stopped, turned around. Stay at least a couple days. Maybe we can make it work. Henry was proud of Joe now, and so was Kate. That evening, Callie, walking through the garden, heard sobs. She carefully pushed back the bushes and saw Sarah, who was crying quietly in a corner of the garden. The woman smiled and stepped towards her. Sarah jumped up fearfully. Please don't go. Please sit down. Sarah obediently sat down. I know why you're crying because of Henry, because of the fact that I'm here. Sarah shook her head negatively at first, then waved her hand and spoke. You know, we've been around each other for so many years and we've never looked at each other as like a man and a woman? Yeah, that's right. And now I don't know what's going on. I've driven away the man I was going to marry. I've lost my mind. No, you haven't. And Henry loves you too. I saw the way he looked at you. You think so? But why are you telling me this? Kelly smiled. I guess because I don't love, and never have, the way I love my second husband. Don't think anything of it. That's not why I came here. May was circling her father's desk. Dad, it's gonna be another 20 minutes. You know things don't happen overnight. You see, his company's stock is down 1 point. 1 point? But why so little? You said they crash and you take the firm for nothing. I did, but I don't know what's going on. He shouldn't have any money. No bank will give him a loan. I've made sure of that. May plopped down on the couch and turned on the TV. Matthew also raised his head and stared at the screen with amazed eyes. The beautiful young newscaster was talking about big changes, expansions at Henry's company. Say, Henry here, the man seems to have it all. He's achieved everything. But why do you suddenly decide to move on? It's very simple. You know, I realized at any age, you can start over. My son made a turn. Now he's a coach. He's getting married soon, and soon there will be a new addition to the family. Here's me. I also have weddings coming up and a new family member, a grandson or granddaughter. So why should the business stand still? We will grow and grow as our big friendly family. May jumped up. I hate it. I hate it. Her father was tensely looking at the computer. What is it? Money jumped up to him. What is it? Our stock is going down and someone's buying it up real fast. And I think I know who. That bastard. He's outplayed me again. Matthew slammed the laptop lid down hard. He slammed it down so hard that it cracked. May looked at him fearfully. What are you looking at? Go get a job. We'll be walking around the world with our hands out. May cried, and Matthew swore again. There was only one thing Joe had left to do before the wedding. They stopped outside the hospital where Kate was interning. Why are we here? We have to. They entered the hospital and Joe literally dragged her along. Finally finding the right door, he pushed it open. A man with a bald head and a long nose stepped up to meet them. Joe looked at Kate. Him? She nodded, and Joe took great pleasure in punching him in the nose. That's it now. An ordinary working day in the same place and team did not foreshadow anything unusual. Having taken his workplace, Tony turned on the computer and began to work, as usual catching Veronica's glances, which she threw at him furtively. The whole office knew that Veronica was in love with him, and Tony even found it annoying. Colleagues often teased him, and it was unpleasant for him. Tony, of course, joked about it, but in his heart, that's what struck him. He is a free man, prominent, quite well-to-do. Not so long ago bought an apartment, albeit on the outskirts of the city, but a 2-bedroom. And Veronica, not his type at all. You could walk past her on the street and not notice her. He didn't like fat women at all, and even with the baggage of a 4-year-old daughter. One should choose according to oneself, and not go for something that costs an order of magnitude more, he thought. Nanny, The economist from the neighboring office was the perfect match for Veronica, a bald, chubby guy with a pot belly and glasses. But even he doesn't pay attention to Veronica. Probably doesn't pick him out for himself either. There'd be fewer lonely people if everyone chose their soulmate of the same level. You going to lunch? Tony heard Harvey's voice working at the table next to him and looked at his watch. It was already lunchtime too. He stretched and rose from his chair. Let's go. They walked out of the office and rushed toward the elevator as suddenly. Tony even blinked a few times, thinking he was imagining it, but no, it was real. A girl he'd never seen before was walking towards them, but if he had, he wouldn't have been able to forget her. She looked like she had stepped off the cover of a glossy magazine. Her blonde, wavy hair fell over her naked, graceful shoulders, and the figure that was encased in the pink dress, the slim waist, the wide hips, the breasts. Tony thought she was between a size 2 and 3. Beautiful face, perfect makeup, manicure, that dress, thin stiletto sandals. Everything about her was perfect. Tony admired the girl, unable to take his eyes off her. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Other men present here, also as mesmerized, looked at this goddess. But the goddess, not noticing anyone, continued her way. She passed Tony and Harvey without even looking at them, and they turned around. "What a doll," said Harvey in a whisper, almost drooling. "What an ass." Tony also noticed her rounded ass, which was tightened by the dress. "Perfect. Not on weekends either. Tony, the places I like to go are not likely to be to your liking," she said in a somewhat condescending tone. "I'm sure she would. Let's go anywhere you like." Well, Marian smiled a little, and her eyes sparkled slyly. "Then on Saturday at the restaurant Turandot. Do you know it?" "No, but I'd love to go there with you." Tony was so happy he could fly to the moon and leave a phone number. Marian took a pen out of her purse and wrote her phone number on a napkin. "Thank you," replied Tony, putting the napkin in his pocket. He was in a great mood the rest of the day, looking forward to their meeting on Saturday. He bragged to Harvey about his little victory. "You better look at the price tag at that resto before you get excited," he replied. "You can't spare any money on a girl like that." Tony answered, but typed in the name of the restaurant in the search engine. Immediately going to the menu section, he whistled a little. "Yeah, that's what I told you," said Harvey. "Hey, 10 grand a plate. Fucking awesome." Tony scratched the back of his head thoughtfully. "I told you this girl ain't for the likes of us. You want a pretty girl like that, you got to spend some money. I don't believe she has no one. There's no way she doesn't have a man. It's up to you. If you got a little extra money, take her out to a restaurant. I doubt very much you'll be going to a room afterwards." Well, maybe not so fast, but it's still Sunday. Tony wasn't thrilled with the prices at the Turandot, but he wanted Marian so much that he was willing to splurge. "Will there be anything left to go out for on Sunday?" "I'll figure it out," he answered. The next day, when Tony came to have lunch in a cafe located on the first floor of the business center, he was surprised to stare at the table where Marian sat in the company. Actually, it was the company of the girl caused him such bewilderment. Next to the object of his dreams sat Veronica. What could be the society of a queen with a washerwoman? That was the association he had in mind at that moment. "Do you see that?" he asked Harvey. "See what?" He didn't understand. "What's what?" "Marian is having lunch with our Veronica." "So what?" "Who knows who's having lunch with whom?" he replied. Tony said nothing and went to the table where the most beautiful woman in the world was having lunch. "Good afternoon, Marian. Do you mind if my friend and I join you?" he asked. Marian strained her memory, but she couldn't remember the man's name. "Veronica and I would like to talk alone. I'm sorry," she replied, rewarding him with a discreet smile. "But Saturday is still on, I hope?" he asked, a little disappointed. "If you haven't changed your mind, yes," she said. "Of course I hadn't changed my mind." Tony walked back to Nikolai. "Of course you have. I'm dreaming about this Saturday," he thought. Her eyes, the most beautiful eyes he'd ever seen. They were mesmerizing, maddening. He was drowning in them, having looked into them only a moment ago. "What's up? Did you blow him off?" Harvey asked him. "They need to talk to Veronica." "About what?" "That's what Marian can talk to Veronica about," he said in surprise, looking at the table he just stepped away from. I'd ask. Harvey replied. How do you envision it? I don't know. What difference does it make? Taking trays of food, Tony and Nikolai sat down at a vacant table. I'll ask Verka after lunch, said Tony. You should be doing this. You'll never get anywhere with that, Marion, said Harvey. Tony frowned and looked at his colleague. Yes, I'll lay down my life, but she will be mine, Tony replied somewhat irritably. After all, he was not a beggar, and he was not lacking in looks, but Harvey was getting annoyed. He must be jealous, because he was probably drooling over Marion too. But he wouldn't go for it, because with his beer belly it would be ridiculous to approach such a girl. Tony came back from lunch and immediately approached Veronica. Veronica, do you know Marion? He asked, sitting down on the edge of her table. Yep, she answered, continuing to stare at the monitor. She had been in love with Tony for a long time and she knew it was not reciprocated, but it was still very unpleasant to see him drooling over Marion. Veronica realized that she was not beautiful, and to Marion she was like to the moon, but do not love only for appearance. And from where? Asked Tony. In the same school studied, she answered. Well, how small the world is. Listen, Veronica, does she have a man now? Veronica looked at Tony with undisguised surprise. I'm not in the habit of asking people about their personal lives. I understand, but it's important to me, and I have a huge favor to ask of you. One of these days, you could ask Marion if she likes me. Not for nothing, of course. I owe you a treat. Tony, I'm not going to do that, Veronica said a little harshly. Please. He looked at her with a look of pleading. Tony, lunch is over. Go to your workplace. I will. Verochka, please help me. It's a matter of life and death. All right, I will, but just go away. You're the best, joyfully replied Tony and went to his desk, and Veronica continued to work. And on Thursday and Friday, Veronica watched how Tony's eyes light up when he sees Marion. And no man had ever looked at her like that. That's what it means to be beautiful, she thought, sighing sadly. A man like Tony would never pay attention to a gray mouse like her. The long-awaited Saturday came, and Tony was looking forward to the evening to finally meet in an informal setting with the girl of his dreams, thinking at the same time how to continue this evening and at the same time, and the night at his house. This girl had been on his mind ever since he'd seen her, and he'd never wanted anything in his life more than he wanted her. No. Besides, we're almost there, and I really hope you change your mind. I'm not in the habit of sleeping with men for food. It's not like that. Here we are. Tony parked the car in the parking lot of the restaurant. He got out first and opened the door on the side where Marion was sitting, offering her his hand. Tony didn't particularly like the royal style. He was more of a fan of high-tech style rather than flashy pomp. The excess of gold around cut the eye, but for Marion's sake, he was ready to go anywhere, as long as she liked it. They sat down at a table, and Tony thought only about how to make her go to his house after the restaurant. His imagination was painting pictures of their stormy night, so he was filled with an excitement that couldn't be damped. Tony opened the menu and hoped that Marion would not order the most expensive dishes. He himself did not want to order anything at all, but he realized that he had to, otherwise she would understand the reason, especially there were dishes at quite humane prices. So choosing 2 dishes with a total cost of just over $2,000, he hoped that Marion will make a choice in the same price category. Have you made up your mind? He asked, not stopping to devour with his eyes her breasts, slightly protruding from the neckline. Yes, she replied, closing the menu. The waiter came up to them. I would like black cod, eggplant with foie gras and truffles, Thai rice with shrimp, vanilla mango cream, and blackberries. And from the drinks, a martini royale. Tony swallowed nervously, estimating that it was 10,000 if not more. Modesty Marion is not distinguished by modesty, or it is on purpose so. But never mind, this girl is worth it. He immediately thought and voiced his modest choice. Do you come here often? He asked as the waiter left to take their order. I go to different places every weekend. This restaurant is one of my favorites, she replied. How else do you like to spend your time? Very different. What about you? I don't have anyone to hang out with, so I don't go out much. What are your plans for tomorrow? I don't know yet. What do you want to propose? I want to suggest that we meet again, because otherwise I'll suffer all day without you, he said. I'll think about it, indulgently replied Marion. Tony did not like this answer, but he only smiled, continuing to admire her. After all, he still will not rest until this girl will not be his, and he is accustomed to achieve what he wants. So this time he is waiting for a victory, even if you have to spend a lot. But Marion will be in his bed not today, so tomorrow, although even today is not all lost, he thought. I can't resist a question, said Tony, without taking his eyes off his beautiful companion for a second. And what do you want to ask? She asked, taking a sip of her martini. You don't have anyone right now? You're not seeing anyone. Tony was worried, but he hoped for the right answer. If there was, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now, Marion replied. Glad to hear it, but surprised. How was this possible? After all, you must have 1 million fans at least. Well, and they are enough. I wouldn't date just anyone. Would you date me? Tony could not stand it. Marion smiled broadly. Isn't it too early to ask? I don't know you at all yet, just like you don't know me. What I know is enough for me. Well, and me to know time will hopefully be enough, because I am ready to pay attention to you every day. You only need my looks. I know men love with their eyes, but with women it's different. We look at other things. And what things do you look at? He asked. A man should be reliable, that with it, as behind a stone wall, that could solve my problems. Well, also honesty, purposefulness, loyalty, generosity. All this is difficult to find in one person, and I'm not used to change, answered Marion. And I'm just like that. With a smile on his lips boasted Tony. In words, everyone is like that, especially when they want to get into bed, but in fact it turns out that it is not. It's impossible not to want someone like you. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but it's normal. Can I ask why your last relationship ended? So many questions the first time we met. You're so nosy, a little flirtatiously replied Marion. I have serious plans for you. Marion, I'm just crazy about you. I will not humor. I want everything at once, but ready to wait and fulfill all your whims. Well, it still needs to be checked and not so fast everything and immediately. Why are you single? What's wrong with your ex-girlfriend? Or you to her? We quarreled a lot, couldn't come to an understanding. What was it exactly? I wasn't ready to marry her and have kids. Maybe I want to marry and have children. Then said Marion, are you ready even tomorrow? Replied Tony, and the girl laughed a little. How many times she heard something like that and on the fingers cannot count. I mean it, said Tony. I'm sure you are. I answered your question. What was your ex's mistake? There was too much of him, and a man should have his own space. I'm not someone's property or a dog that has to sit at his feet all the time. Then there's the jealousy. I can't stand that. Relationships without trust are impossible, and it's not my fault that men pay attention to me. That's how it is. I like confident men who don't stoop to jealousy. I see. I agree with you. Jealousy is a silly thing, and freedom should be allowed. They finished their dinner and Tony asked for the bill. The waiter left, and he looked at Marion and timidly put his hand over hers. Is this really the end of it? He asked in a whisper. That's all for today, the girl replied, gently removing her hand. I'm incredibly sorry. Have pity on me. I won't be able to sleep. You count sheep and go to sleep. It won't help. Will I see you tomorrow? He asked with hope in his voice. We could. For a long time I wanted to jump with a parachute, but I could not make up my mind. Now I'm ready. Will you join me? That's right. Tony was surprised. That's an interesting offer. Come on, what time should I pick you up? I think 12 o'clock would be fine. The waiter brought the bill and Tony paid about $300, thinking about what expenses awaited him tomorrow. Afterward, he helped Marion up from her chair and they left the restaurant. On the way, they chatted a bit about various topics, and when they reached her house, Marion didn't even let Tony kiss her. She jumped out of the car and rushed to her driveway without turning around. All that dough and not even a kiss. He muttered unhappily to himself and drove home. At home, Tony studied Marion's social networking page long and hard, flipping through her photos 100 times. He was tormented by a wild, unsatisfied desire, and his body reacted to the photo of the desired girl in a certain way. The mood was disgusting. The man could not find a place to be. After a little thinking, he went to the internet and began to look at the profiles of prostitutes. Having stopped on one, remotely similar to Marion, he dialed her number. Having agreed that within 40 minutes the night fairy would be at his place, he continued to look at Marion's photos. Feelings were feelings, but there was no going against physiology. He needed to relieve the tension and blow off steam, or he wouldn't live to see tomorrow. Selena, that was the night fairy's name, was punctual. Tony looked at her with an appraising gaze and invited her into the room. The girl was not bad looking, but she was far from the object of his desire. Since Tony's pants were already boiling, he got down to business without any further ado, pouncing on Selena. The first time was very quick, but it was immediately followed by a second, and after a short break, a third. Of course, he pictured Marion in front of him, and Selena had a similar figure and long blonde hair too. "How hungry you are," Selena said in a panting voice as the third time came to a close. "It's been a while," he replied. "Will you keep me overnight?" Tony looked at his watch. It had been an hour and a half since Selena had arrived at his place. The charge was $200 for 3 hours and $350 for the night. He decided it would be better to save money and make do with 3 hours. 3 hours would be enough. Only half of that time had passed. Tony lay on his back and put his hands behind his head and closed his eyes. "Make me feel good," he said, and Selena immediately got to work. Tony groaned slightly and introduced Marion again. A languid smile appeared on his lips and his mood soared. At least now he would be able to go out with Marion without sex for a while, without the risk of going at her like a crazed male. As Selena walked out after 3 hours, Tony thought about the fact that he'd have to pay less on his mortgage this month. He paid it off early, paying 3 installments a month, and with that, he had 2.5 years to pay it off. But it was good for him. He had a full discharge, so he would be able to sleep well at night. He was still looking forward to tomorrow. The only thing that was bothering him was the next expense. Tony turned on the computer again to look up the prices for the skydiving, and then he'd have to go to the restroom again. Tony was afraid to tell Marion that he wouldn't last that long. For God forbid she might scare him off, but he had to limit his expenses, and he thought about how to do it carefully without losing Marion. Sunday, Tony picked up Marion and took her to an extreme event for which he had purchased a discount coupon yesterday. The pleasure cost $9,500 in tandem with an instructor, and Tony decided to refrain from jumping. It was too expensive. Noticing Marion, Tony immediately got out of the car and opened the door for her. The girl was no less beautiful in her sports clothes than in her evening gown. "As always, you look divine," said Tony. "I try," she replied with a smile. "Aren't you scared? You haven't changed your mind?" "No, I'm mentally and physically ready." "Then let's go." Tony got behind the wheel and drove off. "After the jump, we can go for a little walk. We're going to the countryside. There's a forest and a lake," he said. "Good. We can go for a short while, and then, afterward, wherever you want to go. I'm all yours for the day. We can grab a bite to eat and catch a movie." "Whatever you say," Tony said. "Where do you want to eat?" He really hoped that this time not to such an expensive place. Marion shrugged her shoulders. "It's up to you," she replied, and Tony exhaled in relief. He looked at cafes near where they were going and found a good and budget option. That's where he decided to take Marion after their event. Marion got out of the car and looked up at the sky with a smile where parachutes were floating. "Awesome," she pronounced and looked at Tony. "Shall we go?" "Let's go," he said. The instructor came toward them and soon Marion was sitting in the airplane. "You're losing a lot," she said to Tony, because he had already voiced that he himself will not jump. "I do not want to, especially in a tandem. And no one will let a beginner jump on his own," he answered. "Do you need a photo and video?" asked the instructor. "Of course," replied Marion. Tony didn't show any sign that he wasn't thrilled with the idea. "You can pay afterward," said the instructor before entering the airplane. Tony stayed on the ground and watched as the plane took off, and then Marion jumped out of it in tandem with the instructor. The whole event took very little time, and soon the girl was walking towards him, smiling wholeheartedly. "This is just fantastic," she said. "Incredibly cool." She began to fix her disheveled hair. "I'm glad you like it," Tony said. "I'm going to go change." Marion went to the hangar, and Tony was approached by the instructor. In an hour and a half will be ready photos and video, he said. How much do I owe you? Asked Tony. 10 photos and video on a disc of $1,500. Can I use the card? By wire. Okay. Tony transferred the money and went to the hangar to wait for Marion, who came out about 10 minutes later. The photo and video will have to wait a little longer. Let's take a walk to the lake. Come on, she answered. They walked leisurely through a field leading to a forest where there was a small lake. Tony gently took Marion's hand, hoping that she would let him at least walk with her like this. And to his delight, she didn't pull her hand out. I found a cozy place nearby where we can have lunch after the walk, he said. That's great. Did they have ice cream? I'm really craving some. I think so, but if not, we'll find it later. See, I'm ready to fulfill your every desire. He stopped and turned the girl around to face him. Don't you deserve even a kiss so far? He asked, looking hopefully into the eyes of the object of his dreams. We've known each other for a day and a half. I can't do that right away, she answered, pretending to be a little embarrassed. How much time do you need? He asked, trying to hide his disappointment. Just a kiss. He's already spent so much dough on her, and she can't even kiss him. Don't rush me, Tony. I like you, but we need to get to know each other, not all at once. I'm not used to it, and I don't want to. Then marry me, and we'll get to know each other. You're quick. Come right out. She laughed a little. Do you have a place to live? Yes, I have a 2-bedroom. So I have an apartment. I have a car. I earn a decent income, and I'm ready to start a family. I'll take that into account. Marion carefully took her hand out of his hand and reached for the sun, closed her eyes and directed her face to its gentle rays. That's good. Let's talk about something else, because you're talking about one thing at a time, she added. That's because I can't think about anything but you. I can neither sleep nor eat. I suffer, he answered. How much? She asked flirtatiously. Very much. Are you serious about marriage? Quite. I'm ready to take you to the registry office right now. No, not now, she said. Let's go to the lake. They went forward again, and Tony's chest was once again aflame. No girl had the same effect on him as Marion. After admiring the lake for a while, they went back and, taking the photo and the disc with the video, drove to the cafe. There Tony left $2,500, having fed Marion with delicious ice cream. But there was still a movie ahead, and together with the parachute and the photo shoot, it was still a lot of money. Every weekend, he would not be able to afford it, so he had to hint to Marion, and it was better to offer some kind of vacation that would not hit his pocket. When they got to the mall, they took tickets to the movie, which cost Tony $1,400, because Marion wanted to watch the movie in 3D and on the sofa. It was a full 40 minutes before the show, so Marion suggested walking around the mall. Wow, she exclaimed, looking at the display of small handbags. I've wanted one of those for a long time, she said. Seeing the price tag of $12,000, Tony swallowed convulsively. This is definitely too much, or she's just trying to divorce him. Like kissing and sex, so it's early, and such gifts to beg, so nothing normal. When's your birthday? He asked. In 7 months, she answered and went into the department, immediately asking the salesman to shove her bag closer. Tony's forehead broke into a sweat. No way, he would never buy her a bag, he thought, but he was still afraid of scaring Marion away and was on the verge of panic. Spinning the handbag in his hands, Marion said that it was perfect and she could not buy it. The girl went to the cash register, and Tony had no idea what to do. Nervously looking at the exit from the department, he followed her. But then Marion took out a bank card and paid for the bag herself. Tony immediately exhaled. He felt incredibly relieved. After paying, Marion handed the bag with her new clothes to Tony. There was one more place I wanted to look at while I had time, she said, taking him with her. This place turned out to be a lingerie store. Grabbing a few sets, Marion went to the fitting room. I wish I could take one look, Tony thought, imagining her half naked in one of the sets. His body was tense again, as if yesterday's release had never happened, except he didn't want any more Celine. He only wanted Marion. Soon the girl came out of the fitting room and put 2 sets of lingerie on the register, the cost of which turned out to be a little over $300. That's a lot, she said in a frustrated tone, twirling both sets in her hands and trying to make an incredibly difficult choice in favor of one. I have to go with one. Oh, she sighed sadly, continuing to twirl the underwear in her hands. Watching Marian almost crying. Unable to make a choice, Tony muttered to himself and pulled out his bank card. We'll take both, he said, putting the card to the terminal and watching $300 fly out of his account. Then he looked at his watch. The movie was 15 minutes away, which was good, or God forbid he'd make another turn. Handing Tony the laundry bag, Marian pecked him on the cheek, rewarding him with her charming smile. Thank you, she said. I hope to see you in one of them in the near future. Tony replied. Now it's time to go see the movie. Let's go, she answered, taking him under her arm. Tony watched the men squinting at his companion, and he was filled with pride that he was walking under the arm of such a beauty. Proudly raising his head and smiling, he led Marian to the elevator. He carefully wiped off his 3D glasses and gave them to Marian. And when the movie started, he let himself shyly put his arm around her shoulder, and she let him do it, which gave Tony hope that everything would work out with the girl of his dreams. What did you think of the movie? Tony asked as they walked out of the theater. I liked it a lot. How about you? It was okay. I liked it, he said. Shall we have coffee? Sure. There were many small cafes on the third floor, in one of which they had coffee and cakes, and after Tony drove Marian home, before the girl left his car, he got bolder and kissed her himself before she could realize it. I'm crazy about you, he whispered after that brief kiss. Why don't you come to my place? Tony, don't rush me, she said seriously. Marian responded to his kiss, but pulled Tony away from her as his hands crawled to her breasts. If I survive, you have no idea what's happening to me right now, he replied, leaning back in his seat. The girl smiled indulgently. I'll see you tomorrow. Lunch together? Sure, he answered and took her hand and touched his lips to it. I'll be up all night thinking about you. See you tomorrow, said Marian and kissed him lightly on the lips. A little bonus, she whispered and left his car. Tony closed his eyes and sighed. This is what he's going to do in this state, he thought. He's screwed. There's no way he'll give up now. Marian will be his, but just how to speed up the process. Harvey approached Tony as soon as he sat down at his workplace. How was your date with the hottie? He asked. It was fine, he replied. We spent both days together. Wow, she didn't blow you off. Why would she blow me off? Tony asked unhappily. No offense, so, what was it? Minus almost 50 grand. Harvey whistled. Yeah, I told you couldn't afford it. Almost a third of your paycheck in one weekend alone. Well, it's the first date, then it will be more modest. I'm not an oligarch, so no money will be enough, Tony replied. In such a girl you need to invest, so you better look for a job in the night. With a smile, said Harvey. One can live well without such expenses. There are plenty of cafes where no less delicious than in this Turandot, and entertainment can be cheap and cool. Next weekend, I'll organize the program myself on a budget. I see. What was it? You didn't waste your money, did you? I wish. Just a little handshake, a kiss, and a little hug at the movies. Not much for that kind of spending, Harvey commented. Well, it'll come back soon enough. All right, let's get back to work. Come on, are you going to lunch with her? With her. Harvey went back to his desk. Time passed quickly. It was time to go to lunch, and Tony hurried to Marian's office. It didn't take long for the girl to arrive, and together they went down to the cafe on the first floor. Set lunches cost $10, but after estimating that each day was $20 and multiplying this sum by 22 working days, Tony became sharply sad. Are you doing okay? Marian asked, noticing that Tony was thinking about something. Yes, I didn't sleep well, he answered and smiled. Do you want a ride home today? That'd be nice. Bring you to work in the morning would be nice too, Marian replied, giving him her snow-white smile. I'd love to. Why don't you move in with me? I'll drive you every day, he said. Maybe, the girl replied in a mysterious tone. When? Tony asked immediately. I don't know yet. Time will tell. You sure you want me dead? He said. You're just rushing things. It's just that I'm crazy about you, and you're making fun of me. No, I'm not. Relationships should be gradual, not all at once. I want to get to know you better. I'm afraid of making another mistake. I'll tell you everything about me, and I'd do anything for you. You won't make a mistake. Marion, I'm very serious. I'm not kidding. Marion again smiled broadly and touched his hand. Then be patient and don't rush me, she said. I am both patient and ready to wait. It's just very difficult, Tony replied, looking at the girl with loving eyes. After lunch, Tony went back to his workplace. He caught Veronica's sad look several times, and he barely restrained himself from telling her that it pissed him off. But he decided to just ignore it, especially since he didn't care about her at all. By now, everyone knew he had Marion's hooks into him, and Veronica was no exception. He was catching envious glances from men today, and he was overwhelmed with a sense of his own superiority over them. Except that the financial side of things was very stressful. He had some cash reserves, but at this rate it would quickly run out, and he wanted to pay off the mortgage faster. After work, Tony met Marion at her office, and they went downstairs. Are we going home? He asked, starting the car. We can stop somewhere for dinner, answered Marion. Can we go to your place or mine and cook dinner ourselves? Tony again. I would be very pleased if you cooked me dinner, Tony replied. I don't mind at all, but just dinner and no pestering. Really? I'll do it. You or me? The man cheered up dramatically. Let's go to my place so you don't have to go back and forth, except I have an empty fridge. No problem. We'll stop at the store. Okay. What are we cooking? It's up to you. I'll eat whatever your beautiful hands make. Tony stopped the car at the nearest supermarket, and taking the cart at the entrance, he and Marion went into the store. How about baked trout and fried potatoes and a vegetable salad? Asked Marion. That's fine. Let's do it. Marion began to put in the cart products, but except for the trout and vegetables, there were shrimp, expensive juice, cheese, olive oil, sausage cut, scallops, a piece of beef, and much more. Tony realized that Marion had decided to stock her empty refrigerator. Having laid out at the cash register about $200, he regretted 100 times that he had asked to have dinner at her house, because in a cafe it would have cost him much cheaper. Saved? B. He cursed to himself, dragging the grocery bags to the car. Once in Marion's apartment, Tony gasped. A posh 3-bedroom with a huge hallway and kitchen, furnished with expensive furniture and tastefully decorated. And you live alone in such a nice place? He was surprised. Yes. Did you inherit it? No. Only part of the down payment. The rest was taken in the mortgage, but there is still half a year to pay. I spent almost my entire paycheck on it. My ex used to pay the down payment, but now I'm on my own. I'll pay it off and then I can breathe, because now I'm restricting myself. How big a payment? $2,000 a month to pay it off faster. I'm paying it off early too. Why do you need a place like this on your own? I won't always be alone. Are you ready to let a man into your territory? Tony was surprised. Why not? So, if anything, and kick out easier. Marion laughed. Let's go cook dinner. Having filled the refrigerator with food, Marion started to fish, and Tony asked her to peel potatoes. The two of them did it quickly, and in a little over an hour, dinner was ready. Delicious, said Tony, savoring a piece of trout. I'm a good cook, boasted Marion. You have no flaws. That's why I dream of marrying you, said Tony. Everyone has flaws, replied Marion. Tell me about yours, immediately said Tony. What a sly one. So I'll tell you all my secrets at once, she replied cheerfully. Just a little bit. Well, I am very demanding to men, although it is rather a virtue who looks at it. I already realized that. What else? Now you tell me. I'm a little sloppy, but I'll make up for it for you, Tony replied. Finished with dinner, Marion put the dirty dishes in the dishwasher and sat down at the table again. Will you pick me up tomorrow morning? She asked. Or maybe we can drive from here together. Tony got up from his chair and squatted down next to Marion. He took her hands in his and started kissing her. I love you, don't I? He whispered. Tony, she began to say, but he didn't give her a chance to continue, his lips on hers. He was seized by a frenzy of desire. He lifted Marion from the chair and took her in his arms and carried her to the nearest room. The girl resisted, But he continued on, ignoring her until he had her on the bed and Marian had the finesse to kick him in the groin. "What are you doing?" he moaned, bending in half. "What were you doing?" Roughly she asked and got up from the bed. "You're acting like an animal. Go away, Tony." "Animal? It's normal for people to want physical intimacy with the one they love. If you don't like me, why are you torturing me?" "We've known each other for 3 days. Torturing you? I told you 100 times I can't do it this fast. I asked you not to rush me, you promised, but you just pounced on me like a maniac. I'm sorry, I can't control myself when you're around." The pain subsided and Tony got up from the bed. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help it." "All right. Come on, you have to go." Tony left the room and followed Marian to the door. Before leaving her apartment, he looked at the girl with eyes full of longing and pain. "Have you forgiven me?" he whispered. "Forgiven?" Marian came up and kissed him lightly on the lips, and then whispered in his ear, "Don't rush it." A shiver ran through his entire body as her lips touched his earlobe. "My body reacts to you in a certain way and I can't control it. I want you," he confessed. "Don't get yourself worked up. Tony, I like you, I told you, but you're in too much of a hurry. It's stressful. It's hard to keep my cool around you. I'll go then." Lowering his head, he said, and Marian kissed him lightly on the lips again. Tony tried to hug her, but she immediately pulled away from him. "See you tomorrow," she said, smiling meaningfully. "See you tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you in the yard in the morning." "Good," she replied. Tony sat in the car and wrapped his arms around his head. What a bitch, he thought. A dynamo. She's just making money and keeping him on a short leash, telling him that they'll have it all ahead of them. He'd be ruined before he got there. He'll have to get up an hour earlier to pick up Marian. After sitting like that for a few minutes, he drove home. When he entered the apartment, he immediately took a cold shower to cool down a little, to call Sveta or anyone else. He did not want to spend money, especially since, thanks to Marian, they were flying away at a breakneck speed, and he didn't want anyone but her. In the morning, having had breakfast, Tony called Marian and told her that he was leaving. A little less than an hour later, he was standing in front of her driveway. "Hi," she said cheerfully as she approached the car. "Hi," he replied, squeezing out a smile. The girl kissed him on the lips and got into the car. They drove halfway in silence. "Are you angry with me?" she asked. "No, it just hurts," he answered, and she immediately realized what place he was talking about and smiled, not answering anything. "Are we going to lunch together today?" she asked. "Sure," he replied. "Will I see you at the weekend? My friends are calling me for a barbecue, and I wanted to suggest that you come with me. A friend has a summer house near the city. Will you come with me for both days?" "I'll think about it," replied Marian. She did not particularly complain about such trips to strangers. "I have normal friends. All with girlfriends, by the way. I've already told them that I'm coming with my girlfriend." "You did?" she asked. "That's what I said. That's what he said." "All right then, I'll do it. Let's go." Tony immediately smiled. When they reached the business center, they went inside, holding hands, and Tony again watched the envious glances of the men in the center. Once they reached the right floor, they said their goodbyes until lunch and dispersed to their offices. On Wednesday, Marian said she was meeting a friend in the evening, so Tony didn't need to drive her home. The man was tense at first, thinking whether it was with a friend, but when he saw that after finishing work, Marian was met by a girl in a Volvo, he immediately relaxed. Before getting into the car, Marian kissed him on the cheek. "See you tomorrow," she said, rewarding Tony with her charming smile. "See you tomorrow," he replied, escorting her with his gaze until her friend's car disappeared around the corner. "Is this your new one?" asked Alexandra, Marian's best friend, when they drove away from the business center. "So, another sucker," she answered and laughed. "That sucker drools on you so normally," she said. "Oh yes, he could use a bib." "How long have you been playing?" "Not long. At first I thought he might be normal, but he's not. He's got one thing on his mind. It's funny to see his face change every time he spends money on me, and he spends it on his own initiative," answered Marian. "Poor guy," with a smile said her friend. "Well, would say, as it is, there is not so much dough. I cannot pull such expenses, and he is silent, gritting his teeth and paying for everything. anticipating how to fuck me, thinking that I am obviously sold. So why are you wasting your time with him? I wonder when he'll run out. I'm not gonna sleep with him. You're having fun, Alexandra replied with a smile. A little. How are you doing? I'm good. The usual. There is interesting news. The girl smiled enigmatically. We're here. Let's sit down at a table and I'll tell you about it. Alexandra parked at a small restaurant, and getting out of the car, the friends entered it, sitting down at a table, which they had reserved in advance. Billy is coming for good in a week, said Alexandra, and from Marianne's lips immediately fell a smile. I'm not interested, she answered dryly, taking the menu in her hands. That's not all. He's divorced, her friend continued. Wow, it happens. Oh, come on. Can't you see why? I don't want to understand, and I don't care about his life. Don't lie to me. He's already rented an office here and he's hiring. So he left his beautiful life in Florida and came home. And you didn't believe he was getting a divorce. I still don't. Let's not talk about him. I mean, he'll be here soon. Just wait. Marian looked at her friend and smiled haughtily. Why did you bring him up? You only spoiled my mood, she said. You dreamed not so long ago that he divorced. And now it happened, and you are not happy, Alexandra answered. It's been over a year. I've been rethinking a lot of things. Fallen out of love? Marian, but you are just made for each other. But he could not leak his wife then. He would if he really loved me. That's it. Marian wrinkled her nose and waved her hand. Change the record. It's up to you, of course. He was asking about you. Alexa, I realize he's your husband's best friend and all, but don't make excuses for him. I'm not. And you knew that Billy was married when you two got involved. He was gonna get a divorce when he found out Sima was seriously ill. How do you leave a sick person? And now that she's healthy, I guess he decided to do it. Good for him. But the train's gone. You know how many tears I shed for him. I'm not going to cry over any man ever again. Never again. But with all sorts of suckers you waste time and on the money they put down. Alexandra shook her head disapprovingly. Fools should be taught. And they put themselves down themselves. Don't give Billy my phone number and tell him where I work. I don't want to see him. He'll find you without me, especially if he knows where you live. A waiter approached the girls, interrupting their conversation. Ready to order? He asked. I'll have the crab, lamb salad, lavender raspberry creme fraiche, orange juice, and berry tea, said Marian. I'll have the same, but instead of lamb salad, I'll have sturgeon. Alexandra made her order and turned to her friend again. How do you work at the new place? Why do you need it at all? I wanted to. Normal work like everyone else, replied Marian, understanding where the friend is going. And the money that Billy sends you, did not you spend? No, I haven't even looked at that bill. When he gets here, he can have it all. I don't want nothing from him. He's a benefactor. Thinks money will throw money, and I, as Penelope, will wait for him to condescend to me. Proudly strung her nose, said Marian. And yet you are wrong about him. Well, let's not argue. He will come here. You'll figure out your relationship. I forget what his name is. You know, the one you dated for 6 months. Did he back off? He is. You're Othello. There are no normal men, Sasha, no. Well, my Barry is quite normal, so don't generalize. Alexandra said of her husband and added, Billy too, by the way. Well, consider yourself lucky, and please stop. That's it. Change of subject. Marian said irritably. The waiter brought their order and the girls began to eat. Marian's thoughts were now completely occupied with Billy, the only man she really loved, but she had broken off the relationship with him a little over a year ago. Billy was a friend of Alexandra's husband and lived in Florida, occasionally visiting on business. That's how he and Marian had met one day on another of his visits. Billy had all the qualities that should have had an ideal man for Marian, except that Billy was married and the role of mistress did not suit the girl. Favorite promised to divorce, but his wife was seriously ill. What exactly Marian did not know, because she did not need these details. In the end, Billy asked to wait, promised that later, when she recovered, that he could not leave her in such a difficult moment, but he loved only Marian. All excuses, she thought then. Old as the world, they broke up, and then tears and pain, disappointment, depression, loss of interest in life. Billy called, came to visit, begged her not to tear things up like that, begged her to give him some time. But Marion was adamant it was now or never, and he never got divorced. And so a friend opened an old wound, making her remember the past and feel again the echoes of the pain she had experienced then. Thursday morning, Tony picked up Marion. That she didn't look the same as usual, he noticed at once. She looked as if she had cried all night, which was almost true. "Marion, what's wrong?" he asked anxiously. "Nothing. Everything is fine," she answered and got into the car. "Have you been crying?" "It was my allergies," she lied and smiled. "It'll go away. I already took a pill." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Marion took out her makeup bag from her new purse and started to put on her makeup. She'd been up half the night and had almost overslept for work. There was no time to put on makeup, so she had to go like that, with puffy and slightly red eyes. "How was it with your girlfriend?" asked Tony while Marion put on makeup. "Fine. Went to a wonderful restaurant. Very tasty there. Maybe we'll have dinner there tonight," she asked. Tony tensed up. "I'd love to, but I can't tonight," he lied. "I have to help my parents, I promised, so I'll drop you home after work and go straight to them." "Some other time then," she answered calmly. When they got to the business center, they went to the offices, agreeing, as in all the last days, to go to lunch together. "So is our star still dynamiting you?" asked Harvey Tony when he returned from lunch. "This weekend we're going to my friend's country house. Everything will be there," he answered smugly. "Are you sure?" "Sure. Nature, kebab, booze. We'll sleep in the same room. And if she agreed to go like this, she already agrees to have sex. How much longer can we keep dragging this out? It's obvious she likes me. So envy me, Harvey. Not everyone can have a girl like that." Tony had a smug smile on his lips. "Don't get too excited before the time, as if she wouldn't stand me up again," Harvey replied. "Don't be jealous," said Tony and stared at the monitor. Friday. Getting into Tony's car, Marion sighed sadly and looked at the man. "Tony, I'm so sorry, but I can't go to your friend's dacha," sadly she said, and Tony felt a chill inside him. "What's wrong?" "Why?" he asked, trying to contain his resentment. "Here." Marion showed her hand and Tony didn't realize what was wrong. "What?" he asked, looking at the girl's fingers. "The nail is broken. It's not proper to ride with such nails." "Well, and something else," she answered. "That's not the reason. If it's so important to you, after work we'll stop by the salon and get your nails done." "What else?" "Well, I also started something this morning." Tony knew what she was talking about right away. He felt like smoke was coming out of his ears. This is just a joke, he thought. "That's no reason either," he answered, although it was still a reason. Marion had made it clear that there would be no sex again. "Anything else?" "Nothing else. If you are not embarrassed by my these days and we will stop by the salon tonight, I see no reason not to go," she answered. Marion saw perfectly well how Tony was freaking out, trying not to show it, but it was not good at it. She understood perfectly well that at the cottage he hoped to finally get what she had denied him so far. Only this time he will be a bummer, Marion thought and smiled a little. They stopped by the salon after work. Marion had a new manicure, for which Tony charged $50. She was going to pay for it herself, but he beat her to it. And the girl did not object. It was his business. No one forced him after all. The way to the cottage of Tony's friend was not close, so at 6 in the morning, he picked up Marion. On the way they turned to the store where Tony bought a bottle of martini, mango, and a huge watermelon. It was uncomfortable to go empty-handed, even though his friend said he didn't need to bring anything. He wanted to celebrate his promotion at work, so he bought everything himself. "Do you have water in the car?" Marion asked, taking pills out of her purse. "There's a whole bottle in the glove compartment," he answered. "What kind of pill?" When these days my stomach always hurts a lot. Here is a painkiller I want to take," she answered and took out some water. Tony still hoped that no matter what days they had it would happen tonight. Especially he didn't care if it was these days or not. It didn't matter at all. All week he'd been thinking only about intimacy with Marion, anticipating how this weekend he'd finally get to her body. Marion, on the other hand, was always thinking about Billy. The memories were haunting her, and she couldn't imagine how she could face him again and resist if he started to pursue her. No, she wouldn't give up right away. How much she'd suffered for him, how much she'd cried. Let him suffer too. Tell him she's getting married. Thinking about it, Marion looked at Tony. To him, the poor guy was already exhausted. She even felt sorry for Tony for a moment. Only he's an asshole, and he's certainly no match for her. All she could think about was one thing. What kind of husband is he? He's not. All he thinks about is what's in his pants and the expense account. There's nothing to compare him to Billy night and day. What's on your mind? Tony asked her, interrupting her thoughts. Nothing much, replied Marion, looking out the window. The weather is nice today. Yes, it's lucky, agreed Tony, continuing to think about how to get to her at night. Once at his friend's cottage, Tony noticed with what amazement all the men present there, staring at his companion. After introducing Marion to his friends and her friends to him, he escorted her into the house, to the room they had been given for the night. Marion said she wanted to lie down for a while. She was tired from the road, and her stomach was still a little sore. Can't you take another pill? Asked Tony. I can't take too many. I'll lie down for an hour and it will be fine, she said. All right then, get some rest. I'm going to go help and I'll be back in an hour. Tony left the room and went down to his friends. Is this really your girlfriend? Asked one of them as Tony approached. Yes, why are you so surprised? He asked in a slightly arrogant tone. She looks like the cover of a magazine. A model? Where'd you find one of those? That's a lot of questions. What's the difference? Well, Tony, that's a surprise, said the other friend. Not a girl. A dream. You keep your voice down or your friend will hear about dreams. A third friend laughed. Where are your girls? Asked Tony and looked around. They're in the closed kitchen sorting out the food. They'll be here in a minute. Chatting with his friends, Tony lost track of time, and when he looked at his watch, he realized that it had been 2 hours, not an hour. I'm going to go see how Marion is doing, he said and went into the house. Marion was sound asleep with her pillow in her arms when Tony came into the room. There was still plenty of time before the feast, so he decided that he should not wake her now, let her sleep. Closing the door, he turned back to his friends. Tired. We left early. Let her sleep, he said. Marion opened her eyes and stretched. She looked at her watch and realized that she had slept for more than 4 hours. When she heard the sound of approaching footsteps, she got out of bed and began to comb her somewhat disheveled hair. You awake? Tony said with a smile as he entered the room. He immediately walked over to the girl and put his arms around her, imprinting a kiss on her neck. Marion pulled away from the man. Tony, well, I'm combing my hair, she said. Is everything ready there already? Because I'm hungry. I was just following you to call you to the table. Everything's ready, he said. Good, she said with a smile. They left the house and came to the table outside, where 3 of Tony's friends were already gathered together with their girlfriends, who looked at Marion with scrutinizing glances. Hello, everyone, she said with a smile, sitting down at the table. Shashlik, fruits, vegetables, everything was delicious, but the company. Marion felt like a white crow. Tony's friends took turns squinting at her, as did their friends, except that their looks were different. Definitely the girls didn't like her company. Tony, on the other hand, he sat there like a pompous turkey, showing that she was his girlfriend and feeling his superiority over his friends. And their conversations. What kind of shallow people, Marion thought, regretting that she had come here. There was nothing to talk about and no one to talk to. Tony noticed that Marion was bored and offered her a walk, and she agreed. After a few laps around the garden, they came back after a couple of hours and were told that the bathhouse was about to be heated. I'm not going, she said to Tony. Why not? He asked. We'll go separately, you and the girls. It's those days, she said. Ah, he blurted it out. He'd forgotten all about it. Well, I'll go quickly. Marion sat down on the garden swing and took her phone out of her purse. While everyone was in the bath, she opened an old folder that she had never been able to delete and began to look at the photos from when she and Billy had been together. There's no one like him anymore, she thought, and smiled sadly. Are we going to sleep in the same room? Marion asked surprised when she was about to go to bed and Tony showed up on the doorstep. Well, yes, he answered and began to take off his pants. Well then, you sleep on the couch. She nodded toward the small couch against the wall. Marion, are you kidding? He asked unhappily. There's not enough room for two, she replied. The bed was indeed small, and two adults would not be comfortable sleeping on it. It's fine. He settled down next to her and immediately, taking her in his arms, began to kiss her, but when he felt resistance on her part, he pulled away, making a disgruntled grimace. You smell like beer. I can't stand that odor. Wrinkling her beautiful nose, said Marion. And you forgot again that I have these days, she added and turned her back to Tony. Remembering all the mad words, he said them to himself. Grabbing a pillow, Tony abruptly got out of bed and went to sleep on the couch. Patience was at an end, and he could hardly resist taking it by force. Why did you come here with me then? He muttered. To spend time in nature, she answered. And I told you I'm having these days and probably shouldn't go, but you didn't see it as a problem. And now you're freaking out because there's no sex. Tony, you and I are not going to work out with that attitude, she sighed. We're gonna make it work. I'm sorry I didn't hold back again and sleep well, he said, startled by her words. I just love you so much. Good night, Tony, Marion said and yawned defiantly. Tony did not have a good night. His whole body was aching and his head was full of thoughts. He began to think that Marion was getting off the hook, and he was thinking hard about what to do to prevent her from bumping him off. He got up at 6 in the morning and drove to the nearest place that sold flowers. After buying a bouquet for $200, he went back and waited until Marion woke up to give her the flowers and beg forgiveness for his behavior yesterday. Tony didn't leave the room, waiting for Marion to wake up. As soon as she opened her eyes, he immediately walked over to her and handed her a bouquet of pink roses. Thank you, she replied, accepting the flowers. They're beautiful. I should put them somewhere. She looked around for a vase. I'm sorry I jumped on you again yesterday, Tony said and leaned in to kiss her, but Marion buried her nose in the flowers, inhaling their scent. How they smell, she said with a smile. So have you forgiven me? Asked Tony. I'll forgive you if you don't behave like that again, and I'd like to go home after breakfast. Tony looked at the girl in surprise. I was thinking of going after lunch, he said. Well then, call me a cab. I want to leave early, she answered calmly. Are you in a hurry, or do you hate it here so much? I don't know what to do for another half a day. I want to go home. All right then, we'll go after breakfast then, he said, a little disappointed. Is breakfast ready yet? I don't know. Tony shrugged his shoulders. I'll have a look and find the vase in the meantime. Tony left the room and Marion flopped down on the bed again, putting the bouquet beside her. It amused her to see Tony going out of his way to get to her body, even confessing his love. Thinking about it, she grinned. Funny fool. There's no love here, not even close. Time to end this conversation, she thought, and got up from the bed. Didn't your princess like it here? Asked one of Tony's friends when he informed them that they were leaving after breakfast. She's not feeling well and it's a long way to go. She has to go to work tomorrow, Tony replied. You know, I was watching you two last night, and you're not a couple at all. No offense, said the other friend. Tony pompous and looked at his friend. Why is that? He asked. Dear girl, replied the other one. That's right. One of the girls joined the conversation. Her sneakers alone cost probably half my salary, and her tracksuit is not cheap. As long as I can remember, Tony, you've always had simple girls, and this one's a bimbo. And she's too pretty. You'll be jealous all the time. One of your friends added. We're fine. What about breakfast? Tony waved me off. It's ready. Call your pretty lady. If she eats an omelet with sausage. Tony followed Marion, and soon everyone was sitting at the table, watching whether Marianne would eat such a simple breakfast. Tony, can I make an omelet without sausage? Asked the girl, rewarding everyone with her charming smile. Sure, right away. Tony jumped up from his seat and went to the refrigerator. What else are you having? Just an omelet and tea and cake. Marion looked at the cottage cheese pie, the aroma of which filled the entire small kitchen in the house. After breakfast, Tony and his companion were escorted to the car, and then the whole company began to discuss Marion, and all inclined to the fact that she is not suitable for Tony. And what do you plan to do the rest of the day? Asked Tony Marion, while they drove home. So on the house need to do something and just lie down, a movie or something to watch, she answered. Why don't we lay together? Tony's voice broke out. Again, Marion almost laughed. Just lie down together and watch a movie, and I'll help you around the house. I want to rest alone for a while. I need some privacy sometimes. I see. Tony frowned. I'll pick you up tomorrow then. Okay, are you going to the cafe tomorrow night? What cafe? Tony was surprised. Well, it was Veronica's birthday yesterday. She invited me over on Friday. As far as I know, all of you will be there, and she invited me too. Tony shrugged. Nobody said anything to me. She's probably upset with me, so she didn't invite me. Tony replied and grinned. Veronica has been in love with me for a long time, he added. Have you two been dating? Asked Marion. No. You what? She's not my type at all. It's never possible for me and Veronica to have a relationship. He said that like she was a lipper, noted Marion, because Tony said it all in such a tone, as if he Quasimodo matchmaker. Marion, to be honest, you know her, it's understandable. You probably talked to her, but I'm judging purely from a man's point of view. Veronica is completely uninteresting. She doesn't look after herself, and she has a child. It would be very difficult for her to find a man. I guess some people like fat people. She should look for the right man in general. Well, you're wrong about not keeping track. She's always got her hair, makeup, manicure, and neatly dressed. She's not fat. She's a little overweight, but she's pretty. I don't really understand about the man in question. Do you think you are too good for Veronica? Asked Marion, realizing that that's exactly what this peacock thinks. I am interested in only one girl, and all the others I do not care. Tony replied and smiled at Marion. I only said that people like Veronica are not my type at all. And if I had a child, would you still like me as much? Suddenly asked Marion. Of course, you're a different matter. Tony was lying. Although, as far as Marion was concerned, he probably wouldn't be stopped by anything. He hadn't considered such options for himself, but he'd give up a lot for a woman like that. Tony returned home in a bad mood. After some thought, he called Selena and invited her to his place for a couple hours. He just needed a release, and he got it. And next weekend, he would finally get to Marion as well. No more playing cat and mouse. No more of these days would get in the way. And it's time to set the record straight. He'd never spent as much time running after a girl as he had with her, and certainly never spent as much money on any girl as he had on this one. Monday, Tony came to pick up Marion as usual, and together they made their way to work. Once in the office, the first thing Tony did was walk over to Veronica. Happy past, he said, sitting down on the edge of her desk. Thank you, she replied. I hear everyone's going to the cafe today to celebrate your birthday, and you didn't invite me. Did you? She asked and looked at Tony. I thought I told everyone on Friday. Maybe you weren't in your office. Maybe I was, so can I join you? Sure. I invited the whole team. Veronica, did Mariana say anything about me? No, we're not close friends. Right. That's a shame. He sighed heavily and went to his desk, where Harvey came over. Hey, he said. Hi, Harvey. Tony knew he was going to start asking him about the weekend. Tell me about it. Everything is fine, Tony replied with a smile. Is it finally happening? Harvey wondered. It's done, Tony lied. Well, congratulations. So you two are really together? Of course we are. I didn't believe it till the last minute. I told you she'd be mine, Tony said smugly. Can you afford it from here? If you're smart about everything, you can cut costs, so it's fine. You'll be at our wedding. Is it that serious? Where are you planning it? I don't know yet, but I don't think it's far off. Tony imagined his and Marion's wedding, and the thought came to his mind whether to buy a ring and propose to her. She'd know he was really serious, and if she said no, why would she? I'm sure he will. On Saturday, he would invite her to a restaurant, buy flowers and propose, and then take her to his place and keep her up all night, proving how much he loved her. Before going to the cafe, Marion asked Tony to turn to the flower store. Let's buy her 5 roses, Tony suggested. Veronica did not want to spend it all, especially since he had already given $200 for a gift just today and collected the money to give to the birthday girl in the evening. I like this one, said Marion. looking at the bouquet for $100. "Marion, if all employees give such gifts, so you can go broke," replied he. "But how she will like it, I'll take it myself." Marion took the bouquet out of the vase and went to the cash register. Tony only sighed, but did not offer to pay for the bouquet himself. "And what is the gift in the bag?" he asked. In the morning, Marion left the house with it, and then left it in Tony's car. A set of cosmetics with Dead Sea salts. "Expensive, I suppose?" asked Tony. "I have a friend who drives. She and her husband have stores around the city, but it costs me very reasonable. In general, the cosmetics are elite and worth their money. What do you give?" "We're splurging. An envelope of money will be handed over," he answered, thinking about the fact that Veronica will not help any elite cosmetics and why she needs it. And also, he did not understand why Marion gives such an expensive gift to just an acquaintance. He used to give his ex-girlfriends a birthday gift for a maximum of $200, and this together with flowers. That's how Marion squanders money, and then she doesn't have enough for herself. Tony sighed heavily and took 5 of the cheapest roses because it was inconvenient to go without flowers. The party was in the middle of the party when the slow dance Marion invited Tony's colleague, which he immediately rewarded with a sizzling look. All the dance, Tony did not take his eyes off the dancing couple, nervously rubbing his napkin in his hands. He remembered that Marion didn't like being jealous, but he couldn't help it. The other man was touching her with his hands, and it was driving him crazy. As soon as the next slow song played, he immediately dragged Marion to dance until someone else intercepted. "After the cafe, we always go home?" he asked. "Of course, and get up early again tomorrow," she said. "I hope to spend the weekend together." "Not this weekend. I took Friday off. I want to go to Chicago for 3 days. I have a friend who lives there, and on Saturday it's her birthday," Marion replied, and Tony's face changed dramatically. 25 again. Always something. "Don't you want to take me with you?" he asked wistfully, thinking about the fact that in these seas she will not let the local men pass. "I didn't think about it," replied Marion, amazed at Tony's persistence. She was sure that he was about to get away from her, but he was not going to give up. "Would you go with me?" "Sure, I'd love to," he said. They'd be sure to have everything happen there, and none of these days would get in the way. "All right then, let's do it," she answered and smiled, still amazed at Tony. That evening, Tony started looking for tickets. Wanting and needing, that was putting it mildly. He looked up the cost of business class tickets and his eyes almost popped out of his forehead. No, it was too much. But how would Marion feel if he bought economy? Should he not fly? "No, we have to go. You can't let her go alone." Tony gutted the last of his stash of money and asked his parents to send him $3,000 to borrow. With $1,500, he had tickets for 2 to Chicago and back. He had never flown business class himself, but he was sure that Marion had flown only that way. Having bought the tickets, he immediately called the girl to let her know. "How much do I owe you?" asked Marion, barely restraining laughter when Tony proudly announced that he had purchased seats in business class. "You're insulting me," he replied. "All this is a small thing. The main thing is that we will be together and you will be comfortable." "Tony, I insist. The pleasure is not cheap," she said. "You don't have to give me anything back. If I'm in love, there's nothing I wouldn't do for the one I love. And I hope that in Chicago, you'll finally warm up to me." Tony decided that he would buy a ring and propose to Marion there. Marion felt sorry for Tony at this point, considering she was about to explain to him that there would be no relationship between them. Even though he was a sucker, she didn't want to leave him pantsless. He wasn't going to slow down, so she didn't want to drag out the conversation about the impossibility of a relationship between them. She'd tell him right after she got back from Chicago. On Thursday, after Tony drove Marion home, he went straight to the jewelry store. He didn't know much about jewelry, but he imagined that diamonds cost a lot of money. In the end, he spent almost all his money on tickets and a ring. But the man decided that this was the last installment, which would certainly justify itself. There was still money left for spending in and a bouquet of flowers. Not much, but it should be enough, Tony thought. Now Marion would definitely not go anywhere from him. The flight was not tiring, and at the airport they were waiting for a car, which was sent for them by Marion's friend. "Is your friend an oligarch?" asked Tony as they pulled away from the airport. Her parents are, answered the latter. They have several restaurants and cafes, as well as a huge pastry shop. There were no oligarchs in Tony's entourage, and he suddenly felt uncomfortable, imagining what kind of company would gather at this party. "And what do your parents work?" he asked. They have never talked to Marion about her family. "My father is also in business, and my mother is a psychologist. We've been fighting for over a year." Marion did not want to tell him in detail about her family and their relationship. The girl's father was a very wealthy man, but it was not easy with him. Tired of his dictatorship, Marion flipped out and left home. She sold her grandmother's apartment, which she inherited, and bought the one in which she now lives. That's when she met Billy, who was also a very poor man and fully provided for her. But Marion then wanted to prove to the whole world that she herself is worth something, especially not for nothing she studied at the university. Being still in a relationship with Billy, she got a job, and now, working in the office next door to Tony, she held the position of head of the department with a salary of $5,000 and was quite able to provide for herself and pay the mortgage. Billy, on the other hand, continued to send her money every month into an account that Marion hadn't used in a long time. Billy never counted the money, continuing to help her despite the fact that they had broken up. In fact, he was very different from all those slobbering spitfires like Tony. Billy valued Marion as a person, and he didn't just care about her expenses, and he wasn't obsessed with sex alone. "I see, and my common people live in Eagle," replied Tony, realizing why this girl is used to a beautiful life. "This is a house," said Tony, darting his eyes when they drove into the territory, surrounded by a high brick fence. There were girls in swimsuits, music playing loudly, and vases of fruit and drinks on the small round tables by the pool. As soon as they got out of the car, a girl with long brown hair came up to them with a smile on her face. She immediately gave Marion a hug. "Hi, darling. It's so good to see you," she said, and then looked at Tony in surprise. "Alice," she introduced herself. "Tony, nice to meet you," Tony mumbled, trying not to stare at the girl's breasts, which were barely covered by her bikini top. Of course, Marion was the best, but her friend was very good too, and there were plenty of beauties here. "You can put your things on the second floor in the corner room. And come on in," said Alice. While they were walking to the house, Marion hugged a few more beauties and men. "Do you know them all?" asked Tony. "Sure," replied Marion. "Why are you so tense?" "I didn't expect it to be like this," answered Tony. "So it's like this?" asked Marion, knowing exactly what he meant. "Well, that everything is so cool and there will be so many people," answered Tony. "It's always like that here. Relax and rest," replied Marion. They went into the house, and Tony, looking around, realized that he would never make money on such a thing. Surely Marion's parents have no worse. That girl was used to luxury, and with his salary of 150 grand, he couldn't afford anything less. But on the other hand, she had invited him here, so he had every chance to expect reciprocity, especially since many women liked him, and money was not the only thing that made him happy. They went up to the second floor and entered one of the rooms. Marion immediately took out a swimsuit and went to change in the bathroom, thoughtfully locked the door. Tony changed his clothes right in the room so that when she came out of the bathroom, he was already ready. "Are we going to sleep here tonight?" he asked, devouring Marion with his eyes. She wore a netted summer tunic over her swimsuit, through which her half-naked body was clearly visible. "I don't know. Alice will tell me later," she answered. "Are we going to have fun?" "Let's go." Tony approached Marion and tried to hug and kiss her, but she immediately went to the door, not letting him do it. "They're waiting for us. Come quickly," she said and smiled. Tony followed her, not taking his eyes off her slender body. His body was beginning to react to the girl in a certain way, and he tried to distract himself from thoughts of her. Otherwise, he would get into a very awkward position, considering that he was wearing only swimming trunks. But Tony had brought a towel with him and decided to wrap himself in it to hide his violent reaction to Marion. It was certainly very cool and fun, but only about privacy with Marion in such a crowd of people was out of the question. But Tony still relaxed, enjoying the expensive drinks and appetizers, as well as music and entertainment. The people gathered were cheerful and positive, so he had a good time, hoping that at night his dreams would finally come true. But these expectations were not fulfilled either. Despite the fact that the house was large, it was not easy to accommodate such a large number of people. A separate room was out of the question, and he was sent to sleep on the first floor, where he shared a room with 2 men, and Marion with Alice and 2 other girls went to sleep on the second floor. "Where did you find such a frame?" asked Marion Alice as they settled in for the night. "At work, in the neighboring office works. Runs after me in the hope of putting me in bed," answered Marion. "He's pushing with all his might, but he's spending in full confidence that he can buy me. It is obvious that not from our circle, but with inflated self-esteem," said Alice. "It's fun to watch him. Don't you feel sorry for him?" "Sometimes I do. He's completely brain dead from wanting to fuck me. He's a small-minded fellow. He's already blabbed at work that we had a thing, but soon he'll be laughed at for his imagination. So send him in. He's not drooling for nothing. I'll talk to him when I get back. He asked to come here with me, and I decided to give him a chance to rest, so to speak, as a compensation for unjustified hopes and expenses. I wonder about men like that. Here eyes are there, you see who is in front of you and climb or rather rut like tanks, thinking that he, a horse like that, can something to burn out with a girl like you. It's ridiculous. You have to choose for yourself and not try to do things that mere mortals can't do." Well, he doesn't see himself that way, macho. Not everyone can give an objective assessment of himself. My friend works in the same office with him. She's in love with him. Very nice woman, a little overweight and with a child, but not scary at all. And a good person. You should hear how he talked about her. He thinks he's way above her. How is he superior? In my opinion, he is not worthy of her, Marion said before going to bed. "Oh, girls, there are plenty of stooges like that," said their mutual acquaintance Anna. "They see a pretty girl and immediately flow from all places. Quit these fun, Marion, or he'll turn out to be a psycho. He'll do something that won't be tolerated. Like at Dasha's, remember, a couple of years ago, one such sucker slit his wrists." The girls all crinkled up. "Yeah, God forbid. That's really sick," answered Marion. "I'll talk to him as soon as we get back." "And with Billy never saw again?" suddenly asked Alice, and Marion immediately changed in the face. "No, Sasha said that he is divorced and moving to Washington, but I don't want to see him," she said. "That's great news. Why don't you make up?" "You two were such a great couple," Alice asked. "We were. He left me then, even though he promised to divorce me. It's over between us." "Oh, Marion, where could you find a better one? And it was you who sent him away. Your last one was jealous. This one was nothing. And Billy is a real man. I'll tell you a secret. A lot of people envied you, even me." Alice sighed dreamily. "Only he's married. I'm surprised that his leech finally got off and gave her a divorce. Probably still grabbed half of everything that does not belong to her. That's for sure. Who wants to leave empty-handed? The important thing is that he's free now. Well, since you don't need him anymore, I guess I'll take him." Alice looked slyly at her friend and laughed when she threw a pillow at her. "I'll do it for you," Marion replied and threw a second pillow at her friend. "That was to prove it," Alice said, throwing the pillows back at Marion. The next day was even more intense than the first. In the first half of the day, the whole company went to the sea, where there were rides on a banana, a water tube, a scooter, a game of beach volleyball. A separate piece of beach was set aside for them, and Tony had no idea how much such a birthday celebration could cost. They spent about 5 hours there, and then moved on to Alice's house. Toward evening, tables were set up outside, bursting with delicacies, and then there was live music and a foam disco right by the pool. Tony decided not to deny himself anything, because when else would he be able to attend such an event? "And your golfer is getting into the taste," laughing said Alice, watching Tony drinking a 2015 San Leonardo in the company of 2 of Alice's friends. "And it looks like he's found some new bodies that he can't afford and doesn't have the stature for." "I bet he is. He's never been to a party like this before," Marion replied. The next morning after breakfast, it was time to leave this paradise, which Tony did not want to leave. "Did you like it?" asked Marion, noticing how longingly he looked at Alice's house as they drove off. "I don't know. It was great. I've never had such a vacation, he said. I only wish I could have been alone with you. Marion just smiled and looked out the window without answering. When they returned to Washington, Tony took the car from the parking lot, and on the way home Marion fell asleep. She woke up when Tony's car stopped. Where are we? She asked, looking out the window and realizing that he hadn't brought her home. My place, he said and pulled a ring out of his pocket. Thought about proposing to you, but there was no way. Marry me. Marion clapped her eyes in amazement. Tony, are you serious? She asked. Of course I am, he replied. Tony, I'm sorry, but no. We're totally wrong for each other. I wanted to talk to you about the fact that nothing will happen between us and we won't see each other again. Tony went pale. I don't get it. You gave me hope and now you're telling me we're not going to see each other. Well, we've been talking, getting to know each other, so I came to that conclusion. And I don't love you, she said. Huh. Tony grinned nervously. You're throwing me. Everything inside him began to boil with anger. Dynamic for so long and now you're in the bushes. That long? You sound like months. Let's just go our separate ways. Do you have any idea how much money I blew on you? He yelled. Oh, is that the reason I have to spread my legs for you? Do I look like a prostitute to you? You're worse. He put the ring in his pocket and looked at Marion hatefully. Why did you call me? And this ring costs almost my entire salary, not to mention other expenses. Well, you asked for it, and I did not ask you for the ring, as well as the rest. Now you've shown your nature, which I've already seen. I don't want such a man, she answered rudely. What kind of man do you want? Who will pour millions into you and not fuck you? He almost shouted. Nobody asked you to pour anything into me. By the way, I'll pay you back for the ticket. And for the rest, then give it to me, he roared. Marion laughed. That's all love is, she said. You're going to laugh that I'll fuck you right in the car, he said, and Marion immediately pulled the door handle to get out, but the doors were locked. All you wanted was one thing, all the thoughts in your pants. Just because you tried to buy me doesn't mean I'm for sale. Open the door, she said, giving him a searing look. First, let's go to my place and do what we should have done a long time ago, he said. I'm not going anywhere and I don't owe you anything. Tony unlocked the doors and got out of the car first. Marion also hurriedly left the car, and Tony took her by the arm and dragged her to his driveway. Let go, horny, she said and kicked him in the knee. Bitch, he wheezed, immediately letting her go and lifting his leg to stroke his knee. Get my suitcase and I'll call a cab. Tony went back to the car and opened the trunk, threw Marion's suitcase out of it, and then wandered to his driveway, throwing a few insults at the girl. Marion called a cab and Tony pulled out a bottle of vodka as soon as he entered the apartment. He was close to hysterical and was shaking with anger. After drinking several shots of vodka, he sat down at his computer and started looking for a prostitute who looked like Marion and was cheaper than Sveta. In an hour or so, he was already making out with Nadia. To Mariana, she was certainly far away, but $200 for 3 hours. The girl worked off her money with more than enough, but Tony felt better only physically, and on the soul was incredibly nasty. He still wanted Marion, no matter what. Marion got out of the cab, and Billy came out of the black Range Rover parked outside her driveway, holding a huge basket of flowers. Marion froze in place, looking at the man, and he hurried toward her. Hi, he said with a smile, handing her the flowers. I missed you so much. Marion definitely turned away. Hi, why did you come? She asked, trying to cope with the excitement that overwhelmed her at this moment. To finally marry the woman I love, he answered. It was beyond her strength to resist, and Marion tearfully threw herself on his neck, and Billy immediately hugged her tightly, kissing her neck. Monday. Tony came to work in a nasty mood. He'd shouted Harvey down as soon as he'd opened his mouth to ask how the weekend had gone. He hadn't seen Marion since morning or lunchtime. She must have taken some more time off, he thought, and picked up his phone. He twirled it around in his hands, wondering what to write to her, but he couldn't find the words. Putting the phone aside, Tony tried to concentrate on his work, but he kept seeing her in her bikini and the mesh tunic she'd been wearing the day they'd arrived in Chicago. Tuesday. Tony had just parked outside the business center when he saw Marion step out of the black Range Rover that had just pulled up. But what caught his attention more was the man who opened the car door for her and gave her his hand. He looked to be a little over 30 years old and very presentable. It was clear that he was a rich man. Tony did not hide from the way Marion looked at this macho man. She had never looked at him like that. The man hugged her with one hand and lightly kissed her on the lips, and then she went to the entrance to the business center. The girl was glowing and seemed to light up everything around her with her beauty and charming smile. Tony immediately followed her and barely managed to jump in the elevator, in which, to his joy, except for Marion, there was no one. "Who is it?" Tony asked, drilling her with a stern look. "The one who will beat your face in if you bother me," she answered dryly. "You found a richer fool." "Nothing. He'll find out what a dynamo you are. He'll run away at once." With a sneer, he said. "Tony, calm down. Be a man and accept my rejection with dignity. I don't have any respect for you." "When will you get the money back?" he asked. "I changed my mind after all the time I wasted on you, and you turned out to be worse than I thought." The elevator doors opened. "Get out," said Marion to Tony, who was blocking her way to the elevator exit. "Are you serious with him?" Tony was mad with jealousy and had no idea what to do, no idea what he was saying. Marion stepped out of the elevator and stopped, looking at Tony pityingly. "More than that, he's a real man. I love him, and we're getting married soon. And of course I didn't ditch him. Tony, find someone on the same level as you. And don't cry. I'll pay you back for the ticket and the underwear." Without waiting for an answer, Marion went to her office, and Tony looked after her for a while. His eyes suddenly twitched nervously and his hands trembled. This is it, he thought. There was nothing more he could do, and this woman would never be with him. His dreams of her remained dreams. 3 months later, Marion married Billy and quit her job, working there only 2 weeks after she returned. She now helps her husband with the business, making 4 times as much as Tony. And she paid him back the money for her ticket to Chicago and her underwear. Tony still gave the ring back to the store, although it took a lot of nerve, because jewelry cannot be returned. He has already found a new job and in a couple of days will leave this business center, because after his unsuccessful affair with Marion, there were some bad rumors about him. Veronica was still fond of Tony, despite the fact that Marion had said some unpleasant things about him. However, Veronica did not refuse to socialize with other men, and soon she was to meet one of the employees of Billy's firm. Mariana's goal was to find Veronica a fiancé, and their senior manager liked the woman. In fact, she liked him from the photo. Veronica realized that Tony would never look in her direction, but life must be arranged. At the new place of work, Tony immediately paid attention to Elizabeth. Slender, long-legged brown girl, by type reminiscent of Marion, stood out against the background of the other female employees of the office. The girl agreed to have dinner with him in a cafe, which he himself had chosen. And this time he would be lucky, he thought, anticipating the upcoming stormy night in the arms of the beauty. That's what happens when you don't choose for yourself and think with your head. Tony's image is not fiction, but is based on a very real person. Of course, I made some adjustments, but the essence remains unchanged. And besides Tony, there are enough people who divide others into levels, unable to objectively assess their own. All men like stunning beauties, but not everyone can get one.